dash dot 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 dot, and a roll of black. Please, Maggie added and sighed. With her mind, she knew that she should get used to it. She wasn't a little girl. But somewhere inside something froze desperately every time she had to go to the store, or to the post office, or any place that required contact with human society. Now it was happening all over again. No, she wasn't going to cry at the unfair offense she'd outgrown that long ago, but still. Don't meet anyone's eyes. Don't respond to angry, cruel words. Just exist in the present moment. Live, breathe, do what you need to do, and then exist in the next moment, and so on, endlessly. This strange but unexpectedly effective advice was given to her by Vivian, a colleague at work, and as Maggie knew for sure, almost the only living soul who was not disgusted by her. You, Maggie, be strong, Vivian had told her more than once. Build up your thick skin like a hippopotamus. But it wasn't easy to follow that good advice. It seemed to Maggie that she would be happy to exchange bodies with a hippopotamus and spend her life in Africa, splashing in the cool waters of the Nile or Lake Titicaca. But reality was not magical, materialistic, and ruthless to the extreme for someone like her. We're out of powdered milk, Lexi said, stretching her immense muffin shape after looking at the lower shelves for what she was asking for. Are you going to get fresh? I will, Maggie nodded. Do they have plain condensed milk? Or only with coffee? Oh, can you hurry up? There's people waiting. And I have to go to Edie's for cheese. Taya, the mother of a large family, who had to go to the store as a breath of fresh air, because at that time the 4 youngest children were left under the care of the 5th eldest 12-year-old Timmy. Come on, Taya. Nick, the tractor driver and the village's main joker, grinned with a gap-toothed smile. Can't you see that Maggie wants to sweeten her life for us? What else can she do but eat condensed milk and chocolates, eh? Other joys of woman's life. At these words, Nick winked and dashingly snapped his cap. I don't see any, you know. A chuckle passed along the line like a breeze over dry grasses. It was almost harmless, but with a subtext Maggie knew well. You're a stranger to us. You're not like us and you're flawed. We should pity you. But we don't want to. You're not worthy of pity, so we'll mock you. That's your lot. Accept it, and don't you dare resist our fun. In general, Maggie never really thought about how many people in the village of New York cannot tolerate it, in fact, and how many participates in this collective bullying, so to speak, for company. She had only recently learned about what had been happening to her since she was a young girl, which is exactly what the name of this phenomenon is: collective bullying, at the suggestion of Vivian. Working in a library brings people together. And 2 single women, even more so. Maggie had come here exactly 3 years ago, right out of high school. And in fact, without any education should not have been accepted, but Vivian put in a word with Freddie the head and said that Maggie the girl is Nachaitnya smart. And since the library willing to go to work, the queue is not behind the threshold, so we must take Maggie. For Maggie, the world changed for the better for the first time in years. She had a job, and even if it paid very, very little, but it was enough for her. There was enough to pay for light and other utilities, enough to eat the simplest things and the rest. Maggie still wore the clothes that her mother had bought. New bought a jacket, demi-seasonal and winter boots, and let the quality was market, and if carefully worn, not 1 year enough. Neither cosmetics, nor jewelry, nor even all sorts of things in the house unnecessary Maggie did not buy. Just no need. Once there were aspirations for all sorts of material things, but then, when it became finally and ruthlessly clear what it all somehow lost meaning. And now Maggie saved herself in books. Oh, books. New York's library collection was rich. Classics, that is, naturally, first of all, and in a huge assortment. But there were also a lot of novelties. The superintendent, with Vivian's support, kept an eye on that. And Vivian regularly replenished the collection with what she herself had bought and read. I don't like to reread, she once explained. How many more books are waiting for me, so why go back to the old ones? So let people rejoice. And the first person to rejoice was Maggie. Vivian never said so, but she had chosen some of the new books to please her young assistant. They say that life is more interesting than any book, Vivian liked to repeat with various variations of details. And I'll tell you this, what kind of life should it be to be cooler than that detective story? Well, in the red cover, last month with you read. No, Let such interesting adventures remain on the pages of books, otherwise you may not leave alive. Or in life, if you are very lucky, you will meet one love. But here, you open books and once so many interesting men, and all sorts of different. They're you and noble aristocrats, and brave detectives, and generous millionaires. No, Maggie, personally I from books, no matter what happens in life, no way will not give up. They're my bread. 45-year-old Vivian was born, raised and married here in New York. She knew little Maggie and her mother. But then, after her husband, who went to earn a lot of money, Vivian went to a distant city. Only that did not add up great hopes. Her husband died tragically in an accident at a construction site, and Vivian returned to her small homeland. She got a job in the same place where she used to work in the library. Maggie hurriedly put away her purchases in a cloth shopping bag. She didn't like plastic bags because she had read in a magazine how they were harmful to the environment. Her lips tightened, her eyes widened a little, an unconscious expression on her face, a concentration that helped her stay in the moment, and not to throw haggard glances around, reproachful, questioning, "Why are you doing this to me, people?" After paying for her purchases, Maggie left the store. "No, did you see that?" exclaimed Annie, a woman who came into the store strictly once a week when her roommate brought in his paycheck to buy hot drinks and snacks. "Did you see her face?" "Yes, we have," Taya snorted derisively. "She went out all proud and didn't even look at people." Annie continued to murmur. "She walks around like that, like she's out of this world. She should have accepted that she was ugly and not made a fool of herself." Outside there was the smell of a near thunderstorm and bittersweet cherry blossoms, and the wind was driving a dusty little whirlwind along the road. But higher up, the air was clean and fresh, full of the life-giving succulence of the grasses. The wind was coming from the side of the meadow by the Nesmiana River. Maggie tilted her head back and squeezed her eyes shut, inhaled deeply into her lungs and belly, and exhaled slowly. She opened her eyes and squinted at the disk of the sun sinking slowly toward the horizon. Evening was coming. I was done with business for the day. It had been a long day off, which she'd spent doing some house cleaning. Tomorrow, back to work. But tonight, well, of course she would spend it with a book. Maggie could read fast, as Vivian said, swallow literature. She hurried to her house, which stood at the very edge of the village, and was one of its oldest buildings. The foundations, according to archival documents, were laid at the end of the 19th century. We laid out our purchases and made tea, 1/3 black and 2/3 herbs and berries, a fragrant selection bought from Eddie, a perky old man who traded not only with the locals but also at the market on weekends. Edie was probably the second person, after Vivian, who treated Maggie really well. The girl had changed into her home clothes, a cozy fleece suit of pants and a hooded sweatshirt, pink in color. Her hair, which had been bundled up for the day, was loose, combed and braided. Her mother had taught her to do that. I corrected the pendant on the gold chain around her neck. It was twisted while she was changing clothes, and squeezed it in her palm for a moment. Only this jewelry I had worn since childhood. Only it, in fact, remained as a reminder of my mother. "Oh, it's already cold," Maggie exclaimed, realizing that she had frozen in the middle of the house, and hurriedly poured tea into a cup, added boiling water, and finally, opening a bag of gingerbread with jam filling, sat down in a cozy old plush armchair, covered her feet with a plaid, and opened a book, a new novel from her favorite author, and of course about love. No, Maggie read all sorts of genres, but on days like this, when it was especially nauseating, she wanted something light, with humor, and that necessarily with a happy ending. And also, Maggie didn't even tell Vivian this, but when she read, she always imagined herself in the shoes of the main character. That is, she imagined that she, Maggie from New York, is Stella, Jessica, Angelica, Suzanne, or some other person. Beautiful, so that men would fall at her feet. Strong and independent, but hungry for love, which would surely catch up with her. And once, when Maggie was very young, about 12 years old, she thought that when she grew up, her life would be happy, interesting, and just like in the book. Then, in that happy time, Mommy was still alive, and the curse stain seemed like a small, annoying blemish. Then it was no bigger than a fingernail, and sat above her upper lip on the right side of her face, just as a lady of the gallant age had unsuccessfully tried to draw a fly with pink blush. "Daughter, what are you doing that for?" Ellen exclaimed, finding Maggie with a tube of her foundation. "Mommy, I'm learning how to put on makeup." "Why?" Ellen snatched the cream from her hands. Isn't it a little early for you? How old are you? And then, I bought you a set of children's cosmetics lip gloss, cherry-scented perfumed water and shiny shadows. Mom Maggie sighed and her voice shook. I want to hide this, and she jabbed her finger at a spot. Well, what a silly thing to say. Ellen, crouched down beside her daughter Maggie, was sitting on the floor, drenched in the slanting rays of the sun. It's just a little spot. It doesn't spoil you at all. People have moles, don't they? It's nothing to worry about. Don't give me any ideas. Come on, get up, let's go. Let's go make beet soup, daughter, dinner's coming soon. Maggie really stopped worrying about the stain. She loved her mother very much and trusted her in everything. They lived soul to soul, and when Daddy was alive, everything was wonderful. We lived as a happy family. And then after Maggie lost her father, Mommy died too. The doctors said it happens, one heart failure, and then you're gone. And there was nothing to be done. Grief had entered the house on the eve of a festive, joyous day. Maggie was going to celebrate her coming of age. And now, of course, it was no longer a holiday. What was there to it? Maggie did not understand how to go on living. Thank you, there were kind people. That is, one kind person, Vivian. She took the orphan girl under her wing and helped with everything. And the funeral, and the wake, and then for Maggie, her things collected and took her to her home. Maggie lived there for 2 months, before Vivian decided that the girl, perhaps a little bit hidden her grief deep in the soul, and can safely leave her alone. But even though Vivian was kind and caring, still, with the loss of her mother, something broke in Maggie. And what she'd once had the strength to fight against now came like a tsunami. The stain on her face began to spread when she was 16. It went up and to the side, sliding down, absorbing part of the lip and chin, and poured purple, like a ripe raspberry. There wasn't much money in the little family, but her mother took Maggie to doctors. But those doctors said there was nothing they could do about it. Remove the stain surgically was not possible, lighten in beauty centers. Well, theoretically it was possible, but not to the end, and at such a cost that is unrealistic. Maggie, of course, understood everything. And the people around reminded. People asked what the hell is going on, and also did not hesitate to express their opinions about what an ugly thing it is. And that now, of course, in the future, Maggie will not be attracted to any normal man. But that was the mildest. So shortly before the final exam, someone started a rumor around the school that Maggie is contagious. And what a mess. The principal, the head teacher, and the school nurse were able to calm the students and their parents and convince them that no, Maggie could be among people and would not harm anyone. Naturally, it was impossible to study well in such conditions. And then there was the death of her mother. In general, Maggie finished school and then did not want to think about higher education. No, she'd already decided for herself that she wanted to live quietly and see less people. And the future, prospects. Well, that's for normal people, not for ugly people. And of course, there was a time when Maggie tried to cover up a blemish with makeup. Only there was a problem. The skin in this place was characterized by painful sensitivity, and on all the cosmetics that she tried, her face began to burn and bake. It itched, and even the rash went to the neck and arms. And then Maggie decided that's it, enough. Apparently. Fate? The universe? Some kind of evil fate. Whoever and whatever was behind all this, I guess it was her destiny to live her whole life as a freak. Good morning. Vivian was in her usual good mood. It would have been annoying for any other person, but Maggie was used to it, and even thought secretly that Vivian was like a battery for her. She didn't let her fall into despondency when it was really hard. After saying hello, Maggie went to the back of the room to sort through the new arrival of books. Vivian and the head of the library went along with her without any special requests. Understanding everything, Maggie never checked out books. She worked in the bowels of the institution, putting everything in its place, entering it into catalogs, putting things in order, sometimes fixing wrinkled books. In general, she had enough to do. Vacation's coming up, Vivian said at lunchtime. Maybe we could go away together, huh? Not far. It will be inexpensive, she continued in a soft, delicate tone. And comfortable for you. Vivian thought it was a catastrophic problem that Maggie was locked up at home on weekends and vacations. Yes, the salary of the librarian was not great, But it was possible, for example, at least in a sanatorium for a short time to get out, or, for example, to go on a hike in the picturesque places. Only Maggie was as stubborn as a bull. A donkey, a tour, and even as stubborn as she could, it seems, only she alone. "I'd like to go to Venice for the carnival," she said thoughtfully. Yes, Vivian looked up. "So you are interested in the culture of Italy?" "That's right. They have a wonderful cuisine, and the history of Venice's canals." "Because they wear masks at carnival," Maggie said with grim amusement. "Oh, come on, girl." Her colleague clinked her cup against the saucer with emotion. "You can't do that. You can't throw your life away." "I understand," she sighed and continued, calmer. "It's not easy, but you can't despair. You're going to be happy. Let yourself go out into the world and take your place in it." Maggie shrugged, and for the rest of the lunch hour they were both silent. "I'd like that," she said suddenly, turning to Vivian, a stack of novels under her chin. "Only. There are no miracles in life." It was 30 minutes till the library closed. "Maggie," Vivian shouted, throwing on her beige coat. "Will you close it yourself tonight? I have to go home. It's urgent. The plumber's coming. The kitchen's about to burst. He's coming from the district center. All the parts I need, everything. In general, it's very necessary." "You go. Don't worry," Maggie said from behind a rack of history books. "I'll close it, you go." She was already closing the library herself. It was no big deal. But then the door slammed. Maggie thought that Vivian must have forgotten something. But she would have said a word. She was a talker. And there was silence. Maggie looked out from the back of the room. A late visitor? Not a tidy man. He'd left the door open. And it was raining again outside with hail. Having slammed the door and thinking that maybe it was the children playing around, Maggie went back. It remained to put a couple of books on the shelf and she could leave. But suddenly she froze. A black shadow flashed at the edge of her field of vision. Had she imagined it? Vivian had turned out almost all the lights in the library when she left. Maggie frowned, snickering. What nonsense. She's the only one here. And as if on purpose in refutation of that thought, there was a rustling behind her. "Who's there?" The dark shadow again, now at her side and slightly ahead. It seemed to move in circles around the lonely librarian. "Excuse me, we're just closing up," Maggie shouted into the gloom in a shaky, cheerful voice. "What did you want?" She froze again. She held her breath. Quiet. Empty. Only the creaking of an old tree somewhere out there, Vivian joked. Lived rats who spent their nights reading books on witchcraft and sorcery, hoping to gain power and enslave the village. Nonsense. A deep inhale and exhale. Slowly inhale and exhale. She's alone. It's okay. Maggie turned to walk to the wall, turn out the lights and leave, locking the library. But then the black spot jumped out from behind the shelving unit in front of her. And in the middle of it was a milky whiteness, which was the old woman's face, riddled with deep wrinkles, with deep-set eyes and a hooked nose. The mouth, which seemed to have no lips at all, opened, giving Maggie a warm, moist breath. "I need you. I found you. Swap child, I found you. I need you." Maggie had never seen a horror movie. She never read scary books. She was generally averse to anything scary. Vivian once joked that modern man should not be afraid of scary movies. They help to bear all sorts of bad things in life. Because after you looked at the monster from the depths of the caves, which ate half the city, why should you shake, say, from an overdue payment on your loan? But Maggie disagreed with her. And now, perhaps, she thought, was Vivian right about something? Because, well, really, it's just some old stranger dressed in black who sneaked into the library and pounces with incomprehensible cries. What's there to be afraid of? She was scared. How weak. Her heart skipped a beat. Her legs felt like cotton. And Maggie fainted. "Maggie? Maggie?" Come on, the familiar voice above her was full of concern. "You can't do that, girl. You've got to do something, you know. What should I do, splash you with cold water? Or call a paramedic, huh?" Maggie opened her eyes. The wooden ceiling swayed above her, but immediately returned to stability. Her back was stiff from lying on the bench, and it was hard to breathe. The chain of her pendant seemed to be twisted again under her sweater. Oh, she was squirming, so it was not paralysis that broke her with fear. Well, what have you achieved, old witch? I told you. It's no good. That's how it is. Going for the girl. Maggie looked at the speaker and was surprised to find herself somehow transported from the library to Edie's grandfather's house. You're heavy, he informed her, as if he'd read her mind. I had to carry it. Well, what was I supposed to do? I couldn't stay there. The library was supposed to be closed, and it would have been awkward, a place for books, silence, science. Edie put his index finger up. And not for all the fainting and debating. What kind of debriefing? The speech came through a cotton blanket, so Maggie only grasped the last of it. The old witch of flight. You're sorry, Lexi, for making cruel jokes, but how did you behave, huh? Impossible. Disgraced me, an old man. I mean, I sheltered you. Edie replied and nodded to the side. Maggie now only noticed that besides them there was a third person in the room. That old woman. Shaish. The old man jumped up to Maggie and took her gently by the shoulder. You're going to fall again, and I'll have to lift you up again, won't I? You take it easy, dear. I'm sorry, Maggie sat up gingerly, and she still didn't understand what was happening. No, Grandpa Edie himself was well known to her. A lonely old man, about 100 years retired, he lived quietly, a kind of local hermit. However, it was known that Edie had a son and a grandson in the big city, and they were doing well. They called the old man to them, offered to place him in a comfortable, modern nursing home. But Edie flatly refused and stayed in the village. And somehow, he lived strong, fast, despite all the diagnoses from doctors. He kept a flock of goats with strange, long ears and a few sheep. A local man helped to take care of the livestock. From the milk, Edie brewed amazingly tasty delicacy cheese, which almost all went to the market, and of course the local table. In addition, in his time, grandfather went to the forest he alone knew their special, generous mushroom and berry places, and also collected herbs for tea, and all this also sold a little bit. The mysterious old woman in black sat on a chair at the side and was looking through something in her hands. Maggie squinted. It was beads of colorful stones. Her favorite beads, the old man said thoughtfully. I once gave it to her for her birthday. Grandpa Edie, Maggie said timidly. Who's that? Oh, the old man waved his hand, smiled awkwardly, looked at them both in turn, chewed his lip. Well, first of all, I'll tell you what, don't be scared of her. Lexi, she's a harmless character. She's my, let's say, longtime acquaintance here. Really? I didn't invite her to visit in any way, and I wasn't expecting her at all. But she just showed up. Well, as if from under the ground. I already talked to her. Why did you come here? And she, I'm sorry, old man, I didn't see it coming. She rushed to you. Me. Maggie frowned, rubbing the back of her head, where a lump was forming. Don't ask me questions, I'm shocked. Edie waved his hands, and Maggie realized from the look on his face that he was totally confused about that part of the story. Lexi? Edie called quietly to the old woman. Lexi, my dear, kindly, can't we talk? And that, Maggie isn't mad at you for scaring her. I'm really not mad, Maggie added hurriedly. It's just that you just showed up out of the blue. A lost child, said the old woman. She raised her head, gazed with her eyes, opened her mouth to say something, and suddenly relaxed again. Her shoulders slumped. Her head hung down, her fingers slipping, searching through the beads. There, those were her words that started it all. Edie sighed. I wondered what she was up to. He looked at Maggie in a strange, guilty way. She was babbling about some child, but who? You'd never know it. And then, when I brought her to me, and we sat down to talk, the old man scratched his short, bushy beard, which had not had a single dark hair in it for 20 years. Grandpa Edie, Maggie stood up, stretching. She was feeling better. But Grandpa Edie didn't seem to be doing so well. He was very pale. Would you like some tea? You're right, said the landlord. You've been on your feet all morning. I thought to rest. I was coming out of the forest and I saw this one walking along the road. She was walking like that. I could feel that she was very tired. What road? Maggie asked. The one to the bus stop? No, the one that goes through the grove to the former state farm and turns there. Well, it's also the road that the dacha owners often use to get to the community. So I think Edie squinted. Either someone gave her a ride, or she was coming from the district center, and she could have come there by electric train or some other transport. Only as I know from the last one, Lexi didn't live in the city, in this million-strong city, but far away from here. Does she have any relatives? I don't want to say anything offensive, Maggie suggested cautiously. But don't you think she has mental problems? Did you say that in scientific language? Edie grinned. You mean about Lexi being stupid? Yeah, that's a thing. But I've been through something like that. You'd have to try to stay sane after that. Edie was silent again, looking at Maggie strangely again. What happened? Maggie asked, and the next moment she almost shrieked, because the old woman had moved closer, sat down at the table, and reached for a cup of newly brewed tea. She took a sip, nibbling. She looked at the girl attentively, shook her head. How about some jam, Lexi? Edie asked. There's strawberry jam. Come on, said Grandma. I'm a little fuzzy in my head. I'm sorry if I've offended anyone, but only. Oh, all right. Suddenly she waved her hand, and her voice sounded clear, and it seemed that she was in good order mentally. Apparently you don't believe me either. Nobody believes me. And I found you, didn't I? And she jabbed her finger at Maggie again. Don't worry, Lexi, Edie said. Don't worry. It's all yours and we'll figure it out. Let's have some tea for now. And I'll tell Maggie our story first, if you don't mind, okay? He waited for a while. Silence is a sign of agreement, Edie proclaimed, and then he spoke. Talking about his past, mixing it with what Lexi had told him earlier. And he warned Maggie that in order to make sense of it all, he'd have to go back to the distant past first. At that time, Edie had been some young, Zealand 20-something years old. He had such a temper that he couldn't sit in the village. He wanted to go to the city for big dreams, fresh impressions, some grandiose accomplishments. His parents, ordinary laborers who had devoted their whole life to the land, did not quite understand their only son, but they did not try to stop him. A man is looking for his way, so no stepping stones, just wish him luck. Edie entered a construction technical school, but already in the second year he started working with his hands thanks to science from his grandfather, who was a master of wood and taught him how to handle it so that the beauty came out of any piece, even from a small twig. The fame of Eddie's skill spread like a nightingale's song in the spring, and soon he was invited to join a team that was building a summer house for a big man named Alex Grace. And this dacha was not one of those where people go on weekends to plant potatoes and fry kebabs, although theoretically it was possible to do that here too. But first of all, this dacha was planned as a place of almost year-round residence for Alex's wife Judy, and for his son Ben, who, like his mother, suffered from agonizing asthma attacks. And so, as the doctors advised to spend more time outdoors, such attention was paid to the cottage. This work Edie liked Alex paid generously and said simply, "Make it beautiful. I want to make my wife and son happy." And Edie was happy to try. He covered the railings, windowsills, and everything else he could with skillful carvings. But he also did not forget about the future. He treated it with the right compounds, so that neither bugs, nor dampness, nor time were not afraid of wood. Well, in general, so that in the future Alex's grandchildren and great-grandchildren could enjoy the dacha. The work was going fast, and as they say, with a song. And also the further, the more Edie wanted to sing, not just for fun, but for one particular person. Her name was Lexi, and she was a personal assistant and babysitter to little Ben. The statuesque blonde Lexi was so good, but also strikingly silent and sad. Eddie, however, who had never failed in life, decided that he would get her attention. "Don't try," Lexi said one day when he brought her the first strawberry from a nearby forest. "You're a good guy, but we'll never be together." "Why not?" Edie was taken aback. There was something about Lexi's tone that he didn't like. Oh, he didn't like it. "I'm a curse," she replied. "What?" Edie was taken aback. "What kind of prejudice and superstition is that? It's not Soviet, you know." "I'm cursed," Lexi repeated stubbornly. "My grandfather, a fist, drove away a worker. She was in a heavy situation. She starved to death. That's when my family was cursed. Women can't bear children, and some are barren. I am barren, maybe." She looked adoringly at Ben, who was playing in a sandbox under a red mushroom hat canopy. Since I won't have children of my own, I can at least be a babysitter for this family. Later, Edie repeatedly told himself that, no, he didn't believe in the curse. He wasn't stupid, and it wasn't because he'd given up on Lexi because she couldn't have kids. He decided that they just couldn't be together. They wouldn't get along in the end. However, Edie decided they could and should be friends. Lexi didn't mind that at all, by the way. The work on the cottage dragged on until the late fall. Edie, back home, did not miss Lexi and soon got married. His chosen one was the daughter of the neighbors, and as it turned out, parents from both sides had long ago agreed that it would be good to marry the children. However, the joys of young family life did not prevent Edie from remembering Lexi, and they corresponded. True, Edie's wife, when she learned about this friendship, at first she was jealous, of course, what kind of friends her beloved husband could have. But in time she realized that Lexi was not dangerous. Time flew by. Sometimes Edie, his wife Sophia, and Lexi even met and had a good time together. And it also turned out that Lexi could give 1,000 valuable tips to a young mom and help to get scarce, and even imported things for the baby. Edie had a son. Time flew on. Lexi, as she once said, never married, devoting herself to taking care of Ben. And even as he grew older, well, she somehow stayed in the family. Who else would want me? That's how Lexi explained her situation. And when my master Ben gets married, when he has kids, I'll be useful. Yes, Lexi called Ben that, and even more so, her father, and repeated that the meaning of her life was in faithful service to these people. Edie felt sorry for her, because he reasoned that it was a very good thing when a person was faithful, when they were willing to help. That it's good when a person melds his or her soul with loved ones, and it doesn't matter whether they are relatives by blood or by mutual decision. But at the same time, oh, how unkind, dangerous it is to dissolve into the lives of other people. It's not long to lose yourself. In the meantime, life went on as usual, and one day Lexi sent a happy message. Ben decided to get married, but the choice of the chosen one worried Lexi. And the thing was this, it was the 90s, and a lot, oh how much, had changed. Alex Grace had transformed from the director of a large department store into a successful businessman and was preparing a great future for his son. And Ben, young and rebellious, decided to fall in love with a girl from a dysfunctional family. His father resented him, saying, how could it be so? There are girls from good families. Business partners have already seen several brides. Choose anyone. Everyone will go. Will throw their arms around you. But Ben did not yield to his father's stubbornness and said firmly that he would marry Peggy, and then he could do whatever he wanted. I don't care if they disinherit him. I don't care if they kick him out of the house. But Alex Grace was not going to go to such extreme measures. He waved his hand and accepted his daughter-in-law. And even as Lexi reported, he treated her well. But then, first it became clear that Ben had grown cold to his young wife over time and started looking at other women. And secondly, it turned out that Alex had an insidious, cruel plan. It was that he had found out something about Peggy's past. It turned out that she was moonlighting in a very ancient, shameless profession. And Alex, when he found out about it, at first he was horrified. And then he realized that the folk wisdom that there was no happiness, but misfortune helped. Lexi led an isolated life under her masters, and only Edie in her numerous letters could pour out her thoughts and worries. And now letters flew to him, in which she told about everything that was happening in the family. Alex gave an order to his lawyers, prepare whatever tricky moves you want. And as soon as the heir is born, it should be arranged so that Peggy would be thrown out of Grace's family. Divorce, termination of parental rights, and bonus, she could be committed to a mental institution. Lexi was torn about what to do. On the one hand, she had sworn to herself to be loyal to the family of her masters, and on the other hand, she felt so sorry for Peggy. She was basically a good girl. And as for the call girl thing, yes, it had happened. But Peggy only did it because her brother needed expensive treatment. She wanted to take him abroad for surgery. The brother, by the way, died anyway. Edie was in shock and didn't know what to say to his friend. He was afraid to advise anything. After all, he had nothing to do with it. So he only asked Lexi to be careful. And so Lexi made a decision. She told Peggy everything, and together they decided that she should run away before the birth. Far away to relatives very far away. They quietly packed their things, a little cash. Peggy took one of the family cars and one day secretly left the mansion. And that's when the worst happened. Peggy was speeding down the highway. It was raining. She'd calculated everything. She was still 2 weeks away from giving birth. She had to make it. But she must have been stressed. She felt bad. And then, on the side of the road, Peggy suddenly noticed a frail figure. And she slowed down because it was a girl, just like her, with a big belly. She introduced herself as Helen and said that she was in trouble. Her husband, Pete, wanted to drive her to town, but the car had stalled halfway there. And it was very necessary to go to town. Just today she could see a very good doctor. There he is. Ellen waved in the direction, where by the roadside stood a Ziguli, under the hood of which her husband was digging. He, by the way, noticing that the car was ready to pick up his unlucky passenger, came closer and looked inside the cabin. He nodded approvingly. "It's good that you're a woman," he said. "I wouldn't let Ellen go with a strange man." "So maybe I could give you a ride, too?" Peggy asked. "How am I going to leave the car?" Freddie shrugged his shoulders. "It doesn't seem to be a very big breakdown. I'll get it fixed soon and come and pick up my wife from the clinic." Peggy shrugged. Well, that was a sensible decision. She thought that she would drive Helen to the clinic, and then she would go on her own away from the city, farther and farther away. Then she would take the train. She would go to the Far East, where her relatives lived. Helene hugged her husband tightly, kissed him goodbye, sat down on the front passenger seat, and off we went. Oh, road work. Helene was upset. "Do you know if there is a way around here?" "Yes, there is," nodded Peggy. "There are 2 roads. But the shorter one is often used by big trucks." "Well, maybe we should take the longer one," Ellen said uncertainly. "Can we make it to 4, do you think?" "We will." Peggy nodded. Meanwhile, the rain was getting heavier. It was late fall, and the first snow was falling from the low, slate-black clouds. This second road was really freer. It was not used much at all. Part of it ran through the woods. And then suddenly Peggy was twisted with pain. "What's the matter with you?" Ellen exclaimed. "Is it the baby?" I don't know," whispered Peggy. "Oh, Mommy, it's starting, I think." And apparently at this moment it would be necessary to stop the car. But Peggy did not have time to do it. And also the road was slippery from the rain. And suddenly everything turned upside down. And literally the car shook, drove, and then it flew down the road into the ravine. How much time passed then? How many tens of minutes passed in an agonizing pain and fear-filled nightmare? They were found. Help had arrived. Alex Grace was no fool and quickly realized that his sister-in-law would not have left so easily on some routine errand of her own, so early in the morning, without alerting anyone in the family. And it came out that if it hadn't been for the pursuit of the father-in-law, Peggy would not have been saved, nor her traveling companion, nor the baby, one of the 2 babies born. Yes, the baby was born there, guided into this world only by the love of her mother, who, barely hanging on the verge of fainting after the disaster, but managed to muster the strength to give her life. But the second child that Peggy had carried under her heart just a few hours ago did not survive. Alex Grace, when he realized this, was just in shock. He felt as if he had lost his heart. How could it be? His granddaughter, a tiny baby girl, his son's daughter. It was impossible. It was wrong. It shouldn't have happened in his personal world, where money and power allowed him to get everything he once dreamed of. And suddenly, willfully, he lost his granddaughter. "We are doing everything we can," said the doctor of a very expensive private clinic, to which the injured women were taken, in a trembling voice. "But I'm afraid that your daughter-in-law—" "I don't give a damn about her." Alex Grace roared and slammed his fist into the wall with all his might, knocking down the expensive Venetian plaster that lined the visitors' lobby, shattering his knuckles. "Fool," he growled. "Stupid bitch. Let her die for all I care. I lost my granddaughter because of her. I don't care what happens to her." But the doctors, of course, were fighting for Peggy's life because despite the anger, the hatred that was eating away at his soul like rusting metal, Mr. Grace had paid the clinic generously to do what they could for Peggy, and for her traveling companion and the baby she'd given birth to. Not 24 hours after that terrible car accident, Peggy passed away. Faithful Lexi was by her side to the last. And so was Ben. True. Already at the end, Peggy said she wanted to talk privately with Lexi. As for Peggy's parents, they were far away at that time. They had gone on a vacation on a trip and physically couldn't get there in time. Andy couldn't bring himself to enter the room. Not to his sister-in-law, not to that other young woman. He stood at the door of Ellen's room and frowned, pondering. Was this what fate had ordained? If Peggy hadn't picked up a hitchhiker, maybe she wouldn't have gotten into the accident either. Maybe. Can I give her something from you? The nurse asked timidly. No, Andy shook his head. Keep her here as long as she needs for her health, and then. No, let her get the hell out of here with her offspring. I have nothing to do with this. Not anymore. Lexi had told Edie in one of her last letters how it all went down about Peggy trying to run away, about the accident, about how she had lost the baby and died soon after. These last letters of Lexi's were riddled with bitter guilt. The faithful maid of Grace's family felt guilty. She thought now that she should have thought of some other way to help Peggy instead of this running away. Then, everything would be okay. And then, Lexi showed up on Edie's doorstep, and he didn't recognize her at first. Clad in black, it was as if her face had aged 10 years. Looking away and stammering, confused in her own speech, Lexi told him that she couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't stay in the family she had spent so many years in, because she hadn't kept Peggy and her child safe. She's let everyone down. It's not your fault, Edie said firmly. If my father-in-law hadn't been up to it, why would Paula have run away in the first place? He's the one, the bastard. I don't care. I'm leaving Lexi's side. And where are you going? Edie asked, confused. I have relatives. They live far away, Lexi mumbled. They have a cabin in the taiga. They'll take me in there. And you. I'm sorry, Edie, but I won't write letters often anymore. Forgive me. Forgive me for everything. Well, Edie felt more embarrassed than ever before in his life. You're certainly not guilty of anything in front of me. His wife also showed sympathy. She tried to convince Lexi not to make hasty decisions, advised her to find a psychologist. But she went away after a couple of days. When the old man was silent, Maggie sighed convulsively and shuddered as if a bee had stung her, blinked often. What a horrible, sad story. But there was something in it that was particularly important to her personally. That fellow traveler. Her name was Helene, she whispered. No, I was wrong, wasn't I? But Lexi told her. She had blonde hair. And also, it happened in September? The baby was born in the fall month. The old woman struggled to say the exact date. But it's my birthday. Maggie gasped and put her palm over her mouth. But Mama, she never told me about it. I only knew I was born prematurely. So that's why she doesn't like to remember that time so much. Edie reached out and closed his fingers around her wrist, almost painfully. So this isn't the end of the story. How? Why? What else do I need to know? Maggie exhaled heavily. It was so strange. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice over which a thin, ephemeral, almost bridge had been thrown, and she had to walk across it, but almost certainly risked falling off. But she had to keep moving forward. Lexi. We hadn't seen each other in years. Letters. Well, she sent a card or two a year. Happy New Year and my birthday, Edie said. So usually, politely, nothing personal. And then, lo and behold, today she came. She showed up in person, after all these years. Said she couldn't keep quiet anymore. She said that she lied to me. She lied to everyone. But now she can't keep quiet anymore. And what was the lie about? Maggie asked in a colorless voice, turning her gaze to the old woman. She was sitting with her fingers interlocked and looking straight into the girl's eyes. Lexi. Edie exclaimed, standing up abruptly from the table. Well, what are you doing, huh? That's right, I've always been your friend and still am. Only. That's it. I can't take it anymore. Go on, you tell me. And I. He waved his hand. I can't hear it a second time. Excuse me, I'll just sit on the porch, okay? And with these words, the old man ran out of the house. The antique wall clock ticked quietly. Somewhere inside Maggie was squirming with an irresistible urge to follow Edie's example and run away. Just for good. It was as if her intuition was screaming at her, now you don't need to know what that old woman in black is going to say. And her mind was telling her that it would be nonsense, just nonsense, because, well, look, that old woman, she's crazy, you can tell. But only. On some other unknowable deep level, Maggie realized that everything she was about to hear would be the truth. And so the old woman in black spoke. Then, holding the fading Peggy's hand, Lexi was unwittingly privy to her secret. It turned out that before help arrived, Peggy had made a decision. Not an easy one, but she thought the right one for her. The thing was that even before the accident, while driving and chatting as if about nothing with a fellow traveler, Peggy was suddenly pierced by a pang of white envy. She thought that this young woman will surely become a wonderful mother. And her husband seemed to be a good man. Ellen's baby was stillborn. Peggy's baby was barely audible, but the girl was alive. And then, in a few moments, when the sound of cars in the distance, it was help on its way, Peggy made up her mind. Take my daughter, she whispered, holding out her baby girl to Ellen. Ellen's eyes widened. She had not yet recovered from the shock. Her mind had not yet fully internalized the terrible truth about the loss of her baby. But she listened and heard. Peggy, gasping for breath, only by force of will to keep consciousness, said that her father-in-law, a terrible, cruel man. That the child she gave birth to would not be loved, that it would be brought up by nannies, and then Ben would probably remarry, and perhaps that woman would become a cruel stepmother to the child, not a mother. You're good, whispered Peggy, coughing harshly. Please take her. Let her be your daughter. No one will notice. The switch. Raise her as your own. She is your own, already. The heart-wrenching pain of losing her child was mixed in Ellen's mind with sympathy for this casual acquaintance. But decisive was the moment when the girl slipped into her arms from the weakening arms of her true mother. Very weak, so small. She opened her eyes so transparent, like shards of winter sky, and weakly squeaked. And then Helene cried and nodded. What's her name? She asked. What should I call her? Peggy breathed out and fainted. The next thing they knew, help was rushing around the machine. People talking about how to open the doors safely and get the victims out. But Peggy didn't want to, couldn't go to the other side without revealing this truth to the one person she trusted most in the world, Lexi. She said there had to be someone to know, just in case this knowledge might come in handy for Maggie one day. But she made Lexi swear not to tell anyone unless it was absolutely necessary. And Lexi, oh, how hard it was for her. Bound by that vow and at the same time driven by obligations to the family she had served all her life, she just didn't know what to think, what to do. And so she decided to go away altogether. It seemed to her that it would bring peace to her heart. It would save her from agonizing thoughts about whether she was right to keep this secret. And the years flew by. Lexi kept her word. And then, she herself explained it this way, bad dreams began to visit her lately. And it seemed that the time was coming when the truth would be revealed. Lexi had little to no contact with Grace's family, so barely knew about what was going on with them. But now, just 3 months ago, news came that confirmed her strange dreams and premonitions. It was time to act. Alex Grace had long since passed away. His son, Ben, had been married twice more, and each union ended in a high-profile scandal infidelity on the part of the wives. And Ben also had health problems. Not quite bad, but doctors recommended caution. And the family lawyer directly said that with such a heart it is better to make a will in advance. But to whom? There were no heirs. And then Ben decided that for the simplicity of the matter, he would transfer his property, the lion's share of it, including controlling stakes in several companies, to one person. His name was Taylor, and he had been his faithful assistant for over 5 years. Ben planned to spend the rest on charity. That's it, girl Lexi finished her story with a sigh. Maggie sat there, not feeling herself and barely aware of herself in space and reality at all. There were too many thoughts, and at the same time it seemed that in the head, in the heart, a strange emptiness settled. Maggie, are you all right? Edie, who had already returned to the house at the end of the story, called her gently. I told her to take her time, but she was in a hurry. Probably because she had been looking for you and Ellen's daughter for a long time. She was afraid she wouldn't find you, so she got nervous and hurried. I'm sorry? Did you dump it quickly? The girl replied in a colorless voice and looked at Edie in such a way that he flinched. You. Maggie struggled to speak, her hysteria choking her. She stood up. She stretched out her hand and jabbed her finger at the old woman, who, as if her battery had run out, the battery she had used up on her story had sunk back into herself and was quietly fiddling with her beads. You've been my whole life. My mother. I'm not her kin, am I? No, it's not true. I don't believe it. I didn't believe it either, Edie sighed. Only Lexi doesn't have a habit of lying, and she's crazy, Maggie shouted. No, I don't believe it. None of this is true. Except that with each spouted denial, there was a growing, hard realization inside her, some instinctual realization that this could all be true. Without proof. It's just the way it is. It's a fact. Like the fact that the sun shines during the day except on a polar night. Maggie, I'm sorry, I wouldn't even go near you with all this. Would you believe it? Edie pounded his chest with his gaunt fist. But she did, didn't she? Didn't she run? Well, what else was there to do, huh? You're a fool, I know. I lied, not thinking that you work in our library. No, why? Why did she tell me all this? The realization of a new meaning hit me like a storm. Aha, Maggie exclaimed. What does she think I want an inheritance? That I need money? Well, Edie coughed. Lexi told me that she was old, that she was afraid she'd die with her. And about the money, yeah, what's the big deal, Maggie, huh? Money means something too since you're born with it. Grace, he's a rich man. I had a mom and dad, real ones, my own. I don't want no other. Maggie inhaled convulsively, biting her lip painfully. And I don't want money. And I know I don't want to hear any more. And she rushed out of the house. The hay door slammed, then the front door, then the wicket door a moment later. Edie shook his head. What are we going to do, Lexi, honey, huh? Where am I supposed to put you? Maybe you could whisper an address, the phone number of your relatives, so they could take you away. But the old woman answered nothing. Smiling, she was looking through the beads and thinking about her own. ... A persistent knock on the door woke Maggie. The girl craned her neck and grimaced as she lay down on the sofa for a minute and fell asleep until morning. Or rather, until the day the clock showed a quarter to an hour. I had never slept so long. My nose was deaf, I'd been crying, and my eyes were swollen. Maggie, are you home? Vivian's insistent voice could be heard outside the window now, and Maggie, pulling open the tulle curtains, hurried to open it. Why haven't you gone to work? Vivian broke off, perceiving by the look on her young friend's face that she was not well. What's wrong? Asked the logical question. Maggie shrugged and sniffed noisily, urgently needed to go to the bathroom. I'll be right there. Yeah, Vivian snorted. Unlock the door and we'll deal with this together. Shrugging again, Maggie let her in. Somehow I felt so indifferent to everything. Who insulted her? Was Kolka joking again? Oh, he'll fly into the burdocks, I'll give him a kicking. Vivian grumbled, following Maggie's footsteps. Come on, tell me what happened. Or is it personal? Personal. Maggie gurgled from under the cold running water. I'm fine, really. It's just tired. Vivian was about to say that she knew her too well to believe her, but there was another knock at the door. Maggie, help me. Trouble. Edie's voice was ringing with alarm. Okay, Vivian squinted and went to open the door. What kind of day is this? What other surprises would it hold? Lexi's missing. Edie hooted like a frightened owl. Kidnapped. Okay, Vivian said. Who is Lexi, and since when do people get kidnapped in New York? Or did you get a new goat and call her that? Well, I don't envy the one who's been trespassing on your livestock. Maggie was very angry, hurt, shocked at what she'd been told. But first of all, it wasn't Edie's fault he hadn't started it. And secondly, the negativity receded when she realized that the defenseless, and not quite in herself old woman was in trouble. Even if it is not clear yet in what kind of trouble. Who kidnapped her? What happened? Maggie wiped her face with a towel, sat Edie on a stool, and handed the old man a cup of water. I don't know. He came. In a black car, he said. Oh, I can't, my heart. Vivienne, please give me the first aid kit. In the closet, top shelf on the left, Maggie asked. Who is Lexi and what's going on here? She asked, handing over what she needed. Edie, having drunk the healing drops, finally got his breath back and started talking. He hadn't managed to ask Lexi about her family that evening and decided to postpone it for the morning. In the morning, as was his custom, he thought he would have breakfast outdoors. He took Lexi out too, sat her at the table, poured tea. I went to get some eggs, and as soon as I came out with the frying pan, I saw this guy in black putting her in a black car. She was waving her hands, squeaking something, and he grabbed her and shoved her inside. Well, I went to him. I dropped the rag and oven mitt. I swung the frying pan at him, saying, "Don't touch the old woman." And he said, "Stay out of it. Old man, it's none of your business. I'll take care of her," like Taylor said, and that was it. Eddie looked down at his trembling hands. The frying pan burns on the fingers of his right hand. And then there's Tommy. What's the neighbor's dog got to do with it? Vanessa rounded her eyes. And I repeat, who is Lexi? Tommy ate the eggs, Edie explained grimly. Maggie, having quickly found the ointment for burns in the medicine cabinet, was already putting a bandage on the old man's arm. I wish Lexi had had a chance to try my scrambled eggs. Delicious, with red onions and paprika. By the way, I didn't eat breakfast today. I didn't even drink coffee, Vivienne said thoughtfully, more to herself. I thought I'd go on a diet. I've deprived myself of the gastronomic joy of life for nothing. With this kind of business, with you guys, you're going to miss lunch. Lexi, this is Edie's old friend. A good friend, Maggie said. She showed up in the village yesterday and then she found me. Vivienne, don't just stand there, okay? There, make yourself some tea. I've got some stuffed cabbage left over from last night's lunch. You take it and eat it. Grandpa Edie, you calm down. No. Okay. Let's think together. Maybe Lexi's relatives have come for her? Edie hummed, chewed his lips, stared at the ceiling for a moment, as if the answers could be spelled out there. No, she'd told them she'd gone to a sanitarium. She could lie when she had to. But, oh, I remember. Edie exclaimed so loudly that Vivienne, who had actually gone for the stuffed cabbage, almost dropped the dish. Taylor. That's Ben's heir. But how did he? Why would he do that? I guess no one will ever explain to me what's going on here, Vivienne complained sadly. Maggie sighed. If she'd hoped to get away from everything tonight, to take a break, she'd been wrong. Let's get to the table, she invited Edie. You haven't had breakfast either. Let's talk over breakfast, shall we? And I'll tell it like it is, she smiled sadly at Vivienne. Vivienne listened to the whole story with great attention, but that did not prevent her from cleaning her plate as diligently as before and taking a refill. Oh, Maggie. The older friend was almost crying herself. To know such a thing. How could it be? Is everyone sure? Unless Lexi is suffering from a mental breakdown, it's for sure, Maggie nodded. But that doesn't change anything for me. I only have one mom. And there's only one father. And I don't want anything. I'm not going to go and fight for the inheritance. That's right, Vivienne nodded. But still. Your father. Ben, he's your own father. By blood. And I think it's unfair and cruel. To stay here and not say anything. Supporting Lexi's lie, even if it was originally, like, for good. Although. Vivienne slapped her palm on the table indignantly. We can't say for sure how things would have been if you'd stayed with Grace's family, can we? Maybe Grandpa would have loved his granddaughter and Ben would have been a wonderful father. So, I guess it's just a matter of dealing with it all. And help Lexi out, of course. And how do we do that? Maggie waved her hands. I can't. You can. Vivienne interrupted her. Yes, you can and you should. Time off from work now. It's a family emergency. I'll talk to our superintendent right away. And by the way, I'll go with you. I'm supposed to start my vacation tomorrow. So, as much as possible, while everything is going well? What about me? Grandpa Edie asked resentfully. Lexi is my friend. No one's arguing that. Vivian nodded. But I think that 3 of us going to the city for her is too much. And then, no offense, but your age. And goats. You refuse to go to the hospital because you have no one to leave the animals on. So I'm going to go with Maggie and me. Just tell us everything you know again, okay? The addresses, where to find Taylor. I think we can find them on the internet. Vivian said with an important smile, pulling out a brand new smartphone in a glamorous pink case and opening a browser. Maggie felt like a little girl who had been swept up by a whirlwind, lifted into the sky, and was being dragged and carried somewhere. Events were moving so fast. 1, to write a statement to the head of the library. 2, to collect a minimum of things in a travel bag. 3, once again, the 3 of us discussed a plan of action. 4, turn off all appliances in the house, lock the door and windows. 5, she and Vivian are already on the bus to the city. Maggie fussed and almost ran, but Vivian grabbed her arm just in time. What are you doing? Panic attack, she asked her friend seriously. Come on, breathe. Inhale and exhale calmly, inhale and exhale. No, Maggie squeaked, lowering her head. She had felt it from the very beginning, since they had come to town, the curious, sympathetic, and even unpleasant looks of the people around her. But in the village, she had gotten so used to the general bad attitude that somehow she didn't pay attention. But now, when they were standing in front of a shining tower of glass and concrete, a business center, many floors of which were occupied by the office of the corporation owned by Mr. Gray's, she suddenly realized furiously, piercingly, she has such a thing with her face. A panicked urge to cancel the whole thing. Or at least postpone. I should have worn makeup, Maggie sniffed. It would have been less noticeable. You're allergic to makeup, remember? Vivian said sternly. Oh, well, what kind of a fool are you? Nobody's looking at you. That's not true. Everyone does. Because people have eyes. So they look around. And if someone thinks something bad, well, then he's crazy. And you're beautiful and smart. Do you really think that your father will evaluate you like at the Miss World Beauty contest, instead of just being happy that his daughter alive? Only if your daughter is suddenly ugly, Maggie whispered. Maybe we'll do better tomorrow. Aha. Vivian grinned. We've already spent so much on a room for tomorrow that it's scary. No way. And besides, we're here for Lexi too. Why would they want her? Don't be so shy. Come on, cheer up, keep your head up, don't slouch and smile. Let's go. And Vivian, holding Maggie's hand tightly, headed for the sparkling, clear, clean, revolving door to the business center. The girl at the reception desk downstairs was asked what floor, and passed into the elevator, which lifted swiftly and easily. The doors opened. Are you signed in? Another girl at the reception desk, but now at the office of Gray's firm, asked a question while looking at the computer. No, Vivian answered importantly. We're here to see Taylor, but we have a very important case. I'm sorry, but Taylor only sees appointments or top-level employees of the company, she chirped with stoic politeness. Vivian was not used to giving up. Tell him we're here. Tell him we're here for Lexi. He'll know what we're talking about. The girl frowned, obviously wondering if it was time to call security, poked her finger at the computer. Then she sighed and nodded reluctantly. No, look at this, Vivian hissed to a subdued, embarrassed Maggie. They didn't offer a seat, no tea or coffee. Also, what's it called? Corporation, all kinds of elite society. This place clearly needs to work with personnel. The girl returned a minute later, surprised and embarrassed. I apologize. Taylor will see you in her office. She made a gesture with her hand. Straight down the hall, then left. This was the first time this had ever happened to Maggie. She entered the office with the feeling that she and Vivian were going to have a difficult conversation. They needed to find out why Lexi had been taken away so unceremoniously, so rudely, and worst of all, they needed to make a statement. And Maggie still had serious doubts about the necessity of the latter. But when she entered the office, it was as if all these problems, as if they melted into thin air. Because she suddenly drowned in the eyes of the man across the hall. It must have lasted a few moments in reality, but for her it lasted many times longer. Taylor turned out to be a stately brunette of 35, with correct, as if chiseled by an ancient Greek master, in his eyes. They were the deep color of a stormy sea, in which the calm shades of indigo in the doldrums had not yet faded. The man was dressed in a dark blue suit to match the color of his eyes, and an off-white shirt, but he wore no tie. "Maggie?" He addressed her in a strong, velvety voice, but Maggie was numb and only nodded. "Taylor?" Vivian, who had almost pushed her friend behind her back as if Taylor would attack and bite her, answered for her. "Thank you for taking a moment for us. Do you have any idea why we're here?" "Partly," perhaps he answered evasively, and his gaze shifted from Maggie to Vivian for the first time. Clinging, piercing, sensitive, but without a shadow of aggression. "I'm sorry we're getting to know each other under these circumstances." "When you kidnapped a man," Maggie blurted out, even though she didn't mean to be rude. Edie's grandpa's heart nearly gave out. Lexi is the closest thing to him since his dead wife. I apologize, he frowned, but had the tiniest bit of a snide smile playing on his lips. "Edie, is this the old man we found Lexi with?" "I'm afraid my man acted, somewhat, rudely. I apologize. But believe me, the rush was only out of concern for Lexi's mental state. You see, she showed up so suddenly. And then she disappeared." Maggie and Vivian looked at each other. Eddie hadn't mentioned that Lexi had apparently talked to Gorney or anyone else in his entourage before him. "Have a seat, please," Taylor gestured invitingly to the sheet chairs across from his desk. Vivian plumped herself into one. "Coffee, tea?" suggested the landlord. "No, we just want to talk," replied Vivian, sending her younger friend a glance. "Don't say anything yet." "So, I think I should start by clarifying things a bit." Taylor waved his hand in the air. "The situation and explain what I know." "Yes, please," Maggie said, noting to herself that in all this time, which was the odd thing, she hadn't noticed anything in Taylor's gaze that somehow suggested that he'd noticed her stain on his face. And that was weird, because people noticed. She was used to it, and just this lack of specific attention, it had a strange effect on Maggie. It was as if 1,000 needles had touched her weightlessly and at the same time like a butterfly's wing. Taylor spoke. It turned out that Lexi, though she had left the Gray's family, wanting to cut all ties, had not been forgotten over the years. Andy and then Ben regularly sent her holiday gifts, scarce things, delicacies, and money. They'd called to see if she needed anything, if there was anything they could do to help the people she was now living with. But Lexi stubbornly refused. And then, as time went on, it became clear that something was wrong with her. Her distant family confirmed her suspicions. Lexi was slowly starting to go out of her mind, just like that. But what could Ben do about it? She was one of the quiet crazies, spent almost all her time quietly in the house or in the yard, and that's why no one had ever put her in any clinic for treatment. And then just the other day it happened. It was incomprehensible how Lexi in her condition made it on her own from so far away. But she did, and she went to her old address, the Gray's mansion. Ben was happy to see his now very old babysitter, but he was shocked at what she had told him. He didn't want to believe a word of it, but he did. Ben Gray's had enough opportunity to start looking for information at once. He had learned that the daughter of the fellow traveler lived in the village, and Ben was going to come and talk to Maggie about everything, and not just talk. "He wanted to ask for your consent to a genetic examination," Taylor said, and looked guilty. "You do realize that going on the word of someone who's not quite right in the head, well, confirming that story could have some serious repercussions." "Aha," Vivian said, and added without delicacy, "We agree to that. And then you will realize that Maggie can claim her father's property, not you." "Vivian," Maggie exclaimed, her eyes flushing with shame. "I'm sorry," she turned to Taylor. "I wasn't thinking about the money at all." "Because she's a silly, naive girl, sometimes in places." Vivian intervened again. "An orphan. Anyone can and does take offense, by the way." "Who's hurting you?" Taylor asked sternly, and looked at Maggie so hard that she felt her ears burn and wanted to fall through the ground. "No one. I'm fine." Vivian, enough, please. After Mother, that's when Mother died. I'm the only one she has. And the others. Vivian waved her hand. In general, I see. Expertise. And when, may I say, should the girl meet her father? Or you won't let her meet the father without your expertise? Let's make something clear. Taylor added metal to his voice. And Maggie was even grateful to him for it, because she herself couldn't calm down her friend, who in her understandable, in general, protective aspirations, went completely apart. Since you yourself appeared here, the plans of course change, and I'm ready to inform Ben about your visit right away. As for Lexi, she's gone. I mean, she said she wanted to take a walk down a street she knew, and naturally. You have to admit, we couldn't lock her up, could we? Especially since she seemed to be quite adequate at the moment. It took a while to find her. Ben was worried sick. I sent a man to bring Lexi back when the detective said where she could be, supposedly. And again, I apologize for the rude behavior of my staff. It won't happen again. So, sighing, Taylor drummed his fingers on the armrests of his massive executive chair. May I continue? And he continued. And Vivian, much to Maggie's relief, remained silent for the time being. Taylor said that Lexi was now at Ben's mansion, that he had a private and very good psychiatrist for her, who would determine what her condition was at the moment, and whether Lexi should not, for her own good, be sent to a private clinic for a while. And then Taylor said that business matters, they could wait, but the fact that Maggie was here. I'd like to report you to Ben. What, right now? Maggie squeaked. Yes, Taylor nodded. Wait a minute. Vivian spoke again. I mean, how does that work? You want my Maggie to come across to this, Ben, IES ... who, excuse me, suspicious and maybe not a daughter. And then he'll look at the test results. No, you let me talk. The woman waved her hand firmly at Maggie's attempt to stop her. I've changed my mind. There's no need to rush this meeting. We'd better do this. How fast are these tests done? Basically, you can get the results in a day, Taylor said after a moment's thought. So we'll wait a day, see you later. We found a place to stay here. And then, when everything is confirmed. If it's confirmed, I'll ask you to consider it, Taylor said, squinting his eyes. Not to be insulting, but I think you should realize that. Aha, Vivian nodded. We do. There are crooks, that's the way life is. So we wait. But then she got up to leave, and squinted her eyes as she did so, as well as Taylor. We'll be doing business with all the rights, won't we? No doubt, Taylor replied with a polite smile. Finally, they said their goodbyes and left. And what a long day it seemed to Maggie, and the next one was even longer. Vivian, as if sensing her condition, didn't talk about serious matters and instead talked about everything. She took Maggie out for a walk in the park. The weather was wonderful. And of course they called Edie's grandfather and reassured him that Lexi was fine. And then, pack up. Vivian told Maggie after she finished talking to Taylor. He's going to pick us up and we're going to meet your father. So, feeling weak in her knees, Maggie sat down on the edge of the bed in the room. The results of the genetic test. They confirmed that I'm his daughter? Yes, said Vivian. Good, Maggie nodded. I'll be right back. Just for a minute. And she went into the bathroom. Vivian could hear what was going on in there. Maggie was crying, but she didn't disturb her, realizing that it was natural and in a way even normal. After all, Maggie had just received confirmation that her beloved mommy and loving father, it turned out, were not her own in the very same sense. She, of course, it was clear she wouldn't have changed her attitude towards them for the worse. Still, it was quite a shock. Half an hour or so passed and Maggie came out. Washed, not shivering. You could feel the man pulling himself together. I'm ready, she said. They were silent on the road, and everyone, it was clear, was thinking about their own things. Maggie barely noticed that the house she had driven into was a whole suburban mansion surrounded by a gorgeous garden. Taylor was in the driver's seat and gallantly opened the doors in front of the women. Vivian only snickered at that. Maggie absent-mindedly accepted the offered hand. climb the stairs, enter the marble lobby, which in terms of floor space would be a modest one-bedroom. Maggie froze, because here they were met by a man. He looked even older than his mature years, but in him, though he stood motionless, there was a hidden strength and a need to live impetuously. He gave the impression of a master of life, but right now, he was confused. "I am," he said. "I guess I should have come myself. Or how? I don't know." He nervously ran his hand over his gray and balding head. I feel like, this is a dream. But you're real, aren't you?" He stammered, as if the next word was stuck in his throat. "Yes," Maggie answered. "It's not a dream. And neither am I. I confess I don't know what to do, what to say, how to act right now." He nodded and sighed. Maggie smiled with the corners of her lips. "But I do." Vivian broke the languidly nervous atmosphere as if a glass cup had been shattered with a clinking sound. "It's customary for guests to be invited to sit down, to have tea." "That's right," Ben grinned, coming to his senses. "Of course, let's go into the parlor." In 5 minutes, the maid brought a tray of tea, but the table with all sorts of snacks, from canapes to miniature cakes, was already set. And the conversation flowed. Maggie thought she was dreaming after all. Because, how could that be possible? In fact, when she realized that she could not slip out of this story and back into the usual course of her life, she was expecting some obstacles. And later Vivian told her that she was expecting bad things too. Like the fact that they would be told that Lexi had lost her mind and been put in a madhouse. Or that Taylor and Ben would refuse to believe the story and say it was a blatant lie to get the money and just kick them out the door. And I couldn't even believe. I just couldn't believe it could be that simple in life. "Simple?" Ben asked and looked sadly, thoughtfully, when Maggie, in one of the next conversations, one of the next days, revealed her thoughts like that. "Isn't it just? On the contrary, it's all. It's too complicated, but... And why should it be even more complicated now? Why?" Well, Maggie shrugged her shoulders. "It's just that it's kind of hard for me to get used to having a father. Again. Oh, I didn't mean to say." "You didn't say anything like that," Ben smiled. "And know that I don't want to try to replace the father you had, move him. No, I realize that you grew up with other people. You're already. You'll never be little, but I still want you to be my daughter, do you understand?" "Yes," Maggie nodded. "And you. Don't be mad. Lexi, it's because of her." "I'm not going to lie," Ben glared at her. Angry was a mild word for it. "But I didn't touch her, of course. A woman, and an old woman at that. And besides, it's been so long. I think she's already doubting the decision she made back then." "Oh, I'm afraid it hit Lexi hard. It's a lot to carry around for years." A couple days later, by the way, Maggie moved into Ben's house. He said he couldn't let his daughter live in a hotel when she had her own house. Vivian, by the way, was invited too because Maggie said she was her best friend. "You're it," she admonished Maggie. "Don't be shy. If life gives it to you, if your father turned out to be like that, then take the best. You have the right, after all." The point was that Ben had once suggested that Maggie go shopping. Not that he criticized the way his daughter was dressed, but he said he wanted to make up for all the years he'd missed out on presents. So he gave Maggie one of his cards, with which she could buy whatever she wanted. "I don't really need anything," Maggie said. And Maggie was also very touched that her father had never once said anything about her spot on her face, as if she were perfectly all right. And she had been afraid of that he wouldn't want an ugly daughter. And naturally, these days it was necessary to talk business too. Ben said that now Maggie just had to move to town, and Vivian was on his side. "What if I don't want to?" It was the first time Maggie had ever been so openly indignant. "Maybe I like living in my mother's old house. It's cozy. Maybe I like working in the library. Maybe I want to stay in the village. I wouldn't force you, or even persuade you very much," Ben smiled, taking her hand gently. "All I'm saying is that now, your life could change a lot, and I ask you to think carefully about these new possibilities." Another bad assumption did not come true. Taylor, as it turned out, was not at all furious that he was not the only one who would get the firm. However, Maggie was particularly adamant on this point and said at once no, she had no education, so there was no question of transferring the company to her. Ben replied that he hadn't even considered that option, because she really had no education or experience. Because Taylor has been with him for more than 1 year, and he intends to secure a brilliant future for him. But Ben has announced his decision. He intends to gradually bring his daughter up to speed, and also, naturally, it will get a controlling stake in due course. And Taylor, who will own a solid chunk of it too, will always be there to help. "I don't want to think about losing you, Daddy," Maggie exclaimed at one point. "I mean, we've just found each other." That's how she called him father for the first time, and it happened when they were alone together. Ben nodded and smiled, tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't want to think about it either, daughter. You're right, let's not talk about it. I'm not quite an old man yet." And Maggie refused to leave the village so abruptly. She said she needed time to think about everything, to think about what to do with Mama's house, to quit her job in peace. Ben reluctantly agreed, and Maggie and Vivian came back. Maggie was slowly going through her things, deciding what to take with her from the house. There was no need to sell it, and she decided she would just leave it closed. She wrote a letter of resignation of her own volition. And with no one, Maggie shared the story that had befallen her. So she was quite shocked when Nick approached her one day. It was late evening. The girl was returning from the meadow. She went to look at the sunset over the river. "Hello," Nick said and walked beside her, staggering. He was obviously not sober. "So you went to town," he added. Maggie shrugged. "They say you've got a real father. A rich one." "Says who?" Maggie stopped abruptly. She'd told Vivian not to say a word to anyone. Well, Nick stretched out and said, "I've heard that story from the women. I understand," he added with a nasty grin. "Your mother couldn't help herself then, in her time. She was weak, it turned out then. She decided to have an affair with a rich man. Well, it's clear, such women." "Don't you dare." Maggie was choking with indignation. "You don't know what you're saying. Shut up." "Come on," Nick said. "What are you getting so upset about? There's no offense to the truth. And you, why aren't you in town with your dad?" Let me guess, he suddenly moved closer to her. "Money can't buy everything, can it? You can't compete with those city girls, can you? You've been teased by the rich for what you look like, haven't you?" "Well, don't be sad." Nick's hands insidiously dug into her thighs. "You're ugly in the face, of course. But if you look at your face in the dark, you don't have to look at it. It's the other thing about a woman that counts." A scream was already rising in Maggie's throat, but then an unknown force tore Nick away from her, tore and threw him aside so that he fell right into the nettles. He screamed, of course, floundered, there was swearing. "Are you all right?" Taylor's voice came out. He was standing nearby, looming over Maggie like a protective rock, a guarding beast. "I'm here," Taylor said. "I thought I'd come see you. Vivian said you liked to go to the river, so I didn't interrupt the atmosphere." He nodded at a distant car that Maggie hadn't noticed at first. "I thought I'd come up to you, just stand next to you." And then Taylor almost growled at the end. I saw him like that. And he clenched his fists and stepped toward Nick, with the clear intention of continuing the educational process. Maggie, aghast, rushed over and stood between us. "No, don't. I don't want you to do this." "Okay," Taylor exhaled and sent Nick a hard look. "Get out, and don't you dare go near her. Do you understand?" Nick, wailing about how it didn't hurt, and how someone in this city was crazy, hurried away. And Maggie, when the first shock had worn off, laughed unexpectedly for herself. And then Taylor took her hand and said that, since he'd somehow gotten to the very end of the sunset, maybe they should watch the stars go up. Maggie agreed. She loved to look at the starry sky. "I've been thinking about you a lot," Taylor said. The girl withdrew her hand. Oh, what a strange tone he had. And then she froze like a frightened deer because Taylor had said he really liked her. "Impossible," Maggie breathed out. "No, it can't be." "Why?" he asked. "I realize that we don't know each other very well." "No, that's not what I mean." "Then what is it?" You see, Maggie replied with tears in her voice. I'm ugly. Taylor was silent for a moment. Then, he suddenly turned her toward him and put his palms down on her shoulders gently. It's dark now and I can barely see your face, but I know it's beautiful. And when the sun comes up tomorrow, I can say it again without lying. I really think you're an amazing girl. And I really like you, I'm not kidding. It's different if you say no just because. Well, maybe you're not ready for a relationship. Or maybe I'm not your type of man. Or you don't want to confuse personal and professional relationships after all. Ben said I'm supposed to help you get into the business and help you choose the best training so you'll be ready to take the business one day. In that case, I'll accept your choice, and the most I dare ask is to be your friend. But if you refuse me because of this, because of what's wrong with you, then I can't accept it. And I want to ask you out. Maggie had never before, since the stain had taken over her face, thought that love would be possible for her in this world. And even though Taylor had not yet said that very cherished word love, she could understand, she knew in her heart what he felt for her. But the trouble was that it was unexpectedly hard to accept it. But thanks to what he had told her, she was ready to do it. Maggie began, ready to answer with a timid assent. And she wanted to add that he might not think her a frivolous person for agreeing so quickly. But at that moment, a shriek pierced the silence over the river and meadow, and then a loud splash, and then the sound of frightened children's voices. Maggie rushed to the sound, and as she rounded the dense thicket of young trees, she finally realized what had happened. It turned out that it was 3 children of Ty they thought to go night fishing, settled on the highest place of the shore. But one, the smallest, fell off. "Damn it," exclaimed Taylor, who came after Maggie. "I can't swim." "I can swim." Maggie just kicked off her shoes and then jumped into the water. It was not so high to fly down, but the shore was not flat, but steep, going sharply into the depths. Muddy water muffled her. But Maggie didn't give up. A few strong strokes, she looked into the murky expanse of the river around. Got it. Tightly grasping the child's figure, she reached up to the air, to life. It took some more work to get to the part of the bank where they could get out. Taylor grabbed Maggie and the boy. Another of Taya's sons fussed nearby, and the daughter ran after her mother. Taya was shocked when the little girl came running and blurted out that Greg had drowned. However, while the mother, who was almost mad with horror, ran with her husband to the river, her daughter added that Maggie had jumped after Greg and would probably save him. And then Taya saw it all with her own eyes. "Thank you." "Oh, thank you, honey. You saved my favorite son." Taya oohed and ahed, clutching Greg, who was roaring with fright and sniffling. Maggie stood nearby, wrapped in the jacket Taylor had thrown over her shoulders. She was silent. What was there to say? And Taya? Oh, in those moments, looking at Greg's savior, she suddenly realized with heart-stopping clarity how cruel and unfair she had been. And she felt so ashamed. So sick. "I'm sorry," Taya whispered. "Maggie, I swear on my children, never again. I'm sorry." "Oh, you're so kind. I've done you so much harm. I've poisoned you as much as the others. Oh, Maggie, I'm sorry. Ty's husband coughed awkwardly and joined his wife in apologizing. Maggie listened to the man. She was so tired. Frozen. Tired, really. Maggie left the village the next morning with Taylor. But before she did, she had a word with Vivian. And how unpleasantly surprised she was when Vivian confessed that, yes, she had shared a little of the news with a couple of acquaintances. "I'm sorry," she said. "But I'm not used to being a recluse like you." She asked me what we were doing when we went to town. Well, I told her a little. And what? I didn't really do anything wrong, did I? Maggie seemed to agree with her in part. And yet, she was very unhappy that the one she had considered her best friend for years had so openly shared the details of her private life with strangers. And time flew. Life in the city turned out to be unexpectedly interesting. But at first Maggie stayed at home. Ben and Taylor persuaded her to go out to the theater, park, restaurant, shopping. And little by little, though not immediately, but Maggie began to thaw. And it turned out that yes, there are of course people who look at her appearance. There are also those who can comment behind her back. But in principle, It is quite realistic to get away from it. And what was also pleasant, but in Ben's company, where he brought his daughter several times to get acquainted with everything to begin with, no one has not shown that her appearance is unpleasant. And Maggie understood here people, apparently, are afraid to offend the boss. But she was partly indifferent on their own, or forced, the main thing that did not offend. About 3 months later, it became known that Lexi had recovered. The stay in a good private clinic had done her good. She became more sociable, less withdrawn, and she wanted to go home to the relatives she had been staying with all these years. Ben had arranged it for her. But before Lexi stopped by Edie's house, they had a lot to talk about. Maggie, by the way, remembering how kind the old man had always been to her, one day when it was already fall, had approached Ben with a request: could she help Edie a little? His house had a leaky roof, and also the refrigerator was quite old. Ben did everything, and even more, he arranged for Edie to repair the building where he kept the animals, and also brought new appliances for the kitchen. Maggie did not forget about Vivian, with whom she finally made peace. She gave her best friend a bead of black pearls, which she had dreamed of since her youth, as well as a trip to an expensive sanatorium to treat her back. And then, one day, Maggie suddenly realized that she somehow began to not that forget, but let go of all the bad things that she happened to endure in the village from evil people. The girl gradually changed. At some point, she awoke a purely feminine curiosity about clothes, and she carefully, still a little shy, began to buy herself dresses, shoes, and everything else that could be imagined in the closet. Soon she chose a university to get an education on her father's advice. Maggie talked a lot with Taylor. They became closer and closer, and one day he proposed to her. And now Maggie, already without any doubts, was able to accept the fact that in life, just like in a good movie or novel, everything can be just fine, without obstacles and difficulties. She replied in agreement. Only I have to do something before the wedding, she told Taylor. And he accepted her choice. The thing was that Maggie decided to try to get rid of the stain after all. Ben had chosen a clinic with the best specialists and reputation for her. Taylor accepted the choice of his beloved, but on the day on which the most complicated procedure was scheduled, worried. He waited for Maggie in the hall, comfortable, cozy, where in principle could wait for patients, their relatives and friends. Suddenly the doors opened, and Maggie entered with a quick step and threw herself on Taylor's neck. "What happened?" he asked. But the doctor said, "Did everything go through?" "No," Maggie said with a smile. "They canceled it." "But why?" And then she explained, because she didn't need it anymore. Maggie suddenly realized that her spot on her face wasn't ugly at all, as others had convinced her. Yes, she wished it wasn't there at all, but it was impossible. And she didn't want to put herself at risk just to make it a little less noticeable. Maggie was finally able to just accept herself and move on with it, live with it. And Ben and Taylor, the two people closest to her, had been completely supportive of her in that. Alana turned off the bedroom light. Time to go to bed, she thought. Tomorrow would be a day off, so she could stay in bed longer. But it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning and her eyes were getting sleepy. "I can't wait to get under the covers." In her head flashed only one thought. The woman watched her favorite TV series, and here she could not tear herself away. There was everything: love, betrayal, and a difficult period in the main character. All this was so reminiscent of the fate of Alana. The series, as it should, ended with a happy ending. It was clear from the very beginning. In such movies, it could not be otherwise. And in Alana's life, anything could happen. However, the circumstances were such that now she is doing well. I can't believe it sometimes. How great it all turned out in the end. She smiled at the thought that Alana's life was as if it had been scripted by the director of all those TV shows. It all started many years ago, and at the start of her life, young Alana was faced with a lot of adversity and loss. Her childhood came in memories only vaguely. Only sensations and images remained in her memory. Her father, strong and reliable, often carried her daughter on his strong shoulders. The girl adored these moments. And fun, and a little scary to look at the world from such a height, thought Alana, feeling the support of her father's hands. Her mom was like a warm hug, kisses, with a gentle voice, her face so high it was lost in a haze. Alana couldn't remember mom's features, They were blurring and slipping away. But amazingly, for some reason, Alana could still clearly see her mother's dress in front of her turquoise with small black polka dots. And then her parents were gone. Everything happened suddenly. A fire in the dormitory, caused by a cigarette butt left on the sofa, took the lives of young students. Luckily, Alana stayed at a 24-hour daycare center that night. She remembered longing for her family. First she cried, then she was angry at her mom and dad. Why don't they come? Why don't they pick me up like they used to? The nanny, as best she could, tried to explain to the 3-year-old girl what had happened. What had happened? Alana was very small then, but she still remembered her feelings: fear, despair, and for some reason rage. The girl was about to be sent to an orphanage, and the paperwork was already being processed when her Aunt Alex, her father's sister, suddenly showed up. Alex lived in the village, single-handedly raising 2 daughters, and she didn't really need Alana. Brother and sister did not communicate much, but relatives of Alan's father persuaded Alex, saying that it would be wrong if the girl would grow up in an orphanage when her aunt was alive. As a result, Alex's aunt, for whom the opinion of people was very important, sheltered her niece. Alanino's childhood was not a happy one. Aunt Alex was not happy about the extra mouth, but she fulfilled her duties: dressed, fed, and brought up Alana. She sent her niece to school on time, kept her busy, and taught her household skills. But the aunt's attitude toward her own daughters was different. She looked at them with love and tenderness, bought sweets for them with her last money, and dressed them up in clean dresses. Alanina's wishes were not taken into account. She received old clothes, after her cousins. When they fidgeted in front of the mirror, her aunt smiled, calling them beauties and photo models. Alana, trying to get approval, did the same, but heard in her address a completely different assessment. That's the same monkey screams. All in the mother went, would not have been a case to do. So, trying to be inconspicuous and not to attract attention to herself, Alana became more and more withdrawn. To prove to Alex that she had not taken her niece in vain, and that she could be of use to her, became an urgent task for Alana. From an early age, she realized that no one would love her just for her pretty eyes. Recognition and respect had to be earned. Dreaming of independence, after finishing 9 grades of village school, Alana decided that it was time to act. She applied to the college, as continuing her school education and entering a university seemed something impossible. You need to get a profession as soon as possible and become independent, Aunt Alex reasoned, frankly expressing the idea that university was not an option for Alana. Once you get a specialty, you'll start earning your own money, Auntie persuaded, not hiding her thoughts that it was time for Alana to think about a future outside the village. The phrase "you're a hula face" had been said to her, but despite that, Alana felt she had grown up to be a pretty girl. She saw her reflection and noticed traits in herself that set her apart from her cousins. Alana realized more and more how much she resembled her mother, who had also grown up in an orphanage. Alana knew little about her maternal relatives, but she thought that perhaps they would have accepted her differently, better than Aunt Alex. Modest and quiet, Alana did not spend her evenings with boys or go dancing, but she still found admirers in the village. By the age of 16, she was being courted by local boys, which was a surprise to the girl and perhaps proof that she had something special that attracted attention to her. Alana decided that before building a personal life, she wanted to achieve professional independence and feel more confident in her own abilities. She did not seek an early marriage, for she had dreams of a strong family and a loving husband, and she realized that to realize these dreams, she had to become independent first. After high school, Alana went to the city and soon began to live an independent life. She was full of ambition and desire to achieve independence. City life seemed confusing to her at first, but over time Alana adapted to it, rejoicing in her relative independence from her aunt. At the age of 20, Alana proudly received a degree in food technologist, but soon faced the realities of adult life when she realized that without work experience it would be difficult to find a job in her specialty. After graduation, the state support stopped, and the girl had to look for any job to support herself. Alana started looking for work actively, not neglecting even low-skilled jobs, such as a cleaner in the Housing and Utilities Department, because she had to survive somehow. The job was hard and poorly paid, but the offer of a room under the stairs was a lifeline, even though it only provided her with shelter and a minimal means of subsistence. Nevertheless, Alana didn't give up, continuing to look for a better job where she could use her knowledge and get paid accordingly. She went to many interviews, carefully presenting her red diploma to potential employers, but to no avail until one day she was lucky. Alana came to one interview at a beverage company with the hope that she would finally be able to start a career in her profession and prove to herself and everyone around her that she could break the stereotype of a young professional with no experience and succeed. She saw a vacancy in the newspaper and decided to try her luck. Already in the first minutes of the interview, the girl realized that she would not be taken. The employee of the personnel department, it seemed, communicated with Alana for a tick. Maybe she was fulfilling some recruitment plan or creating the appearance of work. I immediately guessed that she wouldn't be hired here as a technologist. And then he entered the office, Kevin, a tall man in jeans and a plain black t-shirt under which I could see strong muscles. You could tell he played some kind of sport or went to a gym. He had a sense of strength and self-confidence. He looked like a Hollywood actor, slightly mocking eyes, white teeth, a smile, charming dimples on his cheeks. The man was about 15 years older than Yana. The girl, without wanting to, looked at him. Then she realized and looked away. It was not enough that he noticed her involuntary admiration. He'd think she was a fool. But Kevin noticed. He winked cheerfully at Alana and turned to the human resources lady. "Who's this young, lovely creature who's applying for the technologist position? But she's not a good fit. She has no experience at all, and her specialty is not the same." "It's hard to find a job for young people without experience." The man shook his head, looking at Alana with interest. "It's hard for them. What about the secretary position?" "I need a new assistant right now. She's young, quick, energetic, and she's got the right looks, which is important for our image. We wanted to transfer a technician to this place from the energy department," reminded the personnel officer. "Let's put the girl on probation." "Something tells me she can handle it," Kevin said, winking at Alana. He grabbed a file from his desk and left the office. Without expecting it, Alana had become a secretary. The job was not difficult, and the girl was quickly brought up to speed. She was required to answer the phone and record messages for the boss when he was absent from work. Also, Alana had to prepare coffee for Kevin's visitors and treat them while they were waiting for their turn in the reception area. The salary offered to the girl was such that she couldn't even believe her luck. With this money, she could rent a nice apartment, eat well, and buy herself nice outfits. She could even save a little every month. But all of this kept Alana's mind at ease. Her new responsibilities, her co-workers, and the chic surroundings of the reception area where she worked now were very different from the dirty driveway cleaning she'd been doing recently. But Alana enjoyed her interactions with Kevin. He turned out to be very kind, understanding, and fun. Her boss treated her well, praised her performance, complimented her, and discussed work issues. Alana didn't notice how she fell in love. It was probably her first and immediately strong love. She couldn't imagine life without this man. The object of her secret love was Kevin, of course. But Alana knew he was married to the beautiful and intelligent Cynthia and had 3 wonderful sons. Trying to condemn herself for these feelings, she couldn't escape her sincere emotions. But she realized that this situation had no future. She shouldn't be a nuisance in someone else's family. After convincing herself over the weekend, Alana decided to end her reverie. Over the weekend, Alana got used to the idea that there was nothing she and the chief could have in common. But on Monday, once again seeing his smile and eyes with a sly squint, the girl again ceased to control herself. She was dreaming, daydreaming for real. She wanted Kevin to hug her, to kiss her, to hold her close. Alana would be the happiest person in the world. One evening, Kevin invited Alana into his office. It was late. The co-workers had dispersed. The boss was preparing for an upcoming audit and stayed late to look over the reports. Alana was required by regulation to stay in her office as long as the boss was at work. Kevin rarely stayed late, once every couple or 3 months at most. That's when he did too. "Alana, I need to talk to you straight," the man began as Alana sat down in the visitor's chair. The girl tensed up. Maybe the chief had some complaints about her work. Suddenly, he would offer her to write a letter of resignation. Where else would she find such a job? "We've had you for 6 months. You're a good girl, you're a good worker. But I realized not too long ago that it's not just those qualities that attract me to you," Kevin continued, looking Alana straight in the eye and speaking in a quiet, calm voice. Thinking about what had happened, Alana was already feeling a little dizzy. Her heart was pounding frantically in her chest and a chill appeared in her stomach, just like before exams. "I think you have some feelings for me too." "I'm right," Kevin said, looking at Alana point blank and waiting for an answer. How could the girl deny the obvious? Yes, of course she did. She'd been in love with the chief for a long time, tried not to show her feelings, thought she was succeeding well. But no, Kevin, it turns out, understood everything. Later, many years later, Alana looked at the situation with different eyes. Kevin had pressured her, creating the illusion of a choice, even though the decision had been determined in advance. Kevin is a rich, powerful man, handsome, mature, successful. She is a young girl, completely dependent on him. Kevin clearly understood how important the job and the paycheck were to Alana. He skillfully manipulated young girls, making them lose their heads to him. However, the realization of all this came much later. In those days, it seemed that fate generously rewarded her. The girl couldn't even believe her luck. Kevin paying attention to her was unbelievable. She loved him and was willing to do anything for him. "Yes, you're right. I have feelings for you too," Alana admitted, blushing. She herself didn't understand why she suddenly felt so vulnerable. "Then I'm not wrong," the man smiled. "Let's make a deal first. Let's stop replacing each other. Second, I really want to spend more time with you. So I suggest right now we have dinner at a restaurant somewhere. How about it?" Alana shrugged. She wasn't yet used to the idea of Kevin himself proposing a relationship to her. It seemed unbelievable. At that moment, the girl had completely forgotten about her boss's wife and his 3 sons. It all seemed unimportant. The main thing was Kevin, who looked at her with tenderness and admiration, smiled and invited her to dinner. "I'm probably not dressed for a restaurant," Alana finally said. There was no dress code in the company. Everyone wore what they wanted to wear. On this day, Alana came to work in jeans and a t-shirt. If she had known in advance, she would have worn one of her favorite dresses, which she now had plenty of thanks to her good salary. Alana, Victor smiled. "You don't understand anything, and you don't even realize how gorgeous you look in those jeans of yours." "It's just adorable," Kevin said with a smile. They did go to a restaurant that evening. It was the first time Alana had been in the cabin of the chief's expensive foreign car, and it was the first time she had been to a restaurant too. The girl felt a little confused at first. She didn't know how to behave and what to say. She was afraid of looking rude and ignorant in front of Victor. But gradually the man did the seemingly impossible with his jokes and compliments. He dispelled her stiffness. She did not notice how she began to communicate with him simply and sincerely. Kevin wanted to know everything about her, and she told him everything about her cold childhood, about her difficult years of study and her work as a janitor. Kevin looked at her seriously and silently, without interrupting, catching every word she said. "Yeah, you've had a hard life," he said when Alana was done. "Life hasn't spoiled you, but you're with me now, and things will be different." Alana smiled. She believed this strong, powerful man unconditionally. Finally, she felt secure and unfamiliar, but so pleasant feeling. Later, they kissed for a long time in Kevin's car. Alana was dizzy from his embrace and kisses, loving his warmth and touch and responding eagerly. But suddenly, Kevin said it was time to leave. He drove her home and kissed her gently on the cheek goodbye. "You don't look good here," he looked around, surveying his surroundings. "We'll figure something out." From then on, their story began. At work, they didn't advertise their relationship, although Kevin could occasionally smile, especially at Alana in front of all the co-workers, and even compliment her. Soon it was known to everyone. It was making Alana a little tense, but no one said anything to her face. People valued their places and held on to them. Probably that's why no one wanted to ruin the relationship with the chief. Before Alana knew it, Kevin had become everything to her. She didn't need anyone else, just to be near him. To hear his voice, to inhale the scent of her favorite person, to feel the beating of his heart. Alana was ready to dissolve in him, to do for him everything he wanted. When they didn't see each other for a long time, it happened occasionally. Kevin would go on a long business trip or go on vacation with his family. Alana couldn't eat anything. She melted before her eyes and stopped caring about anything. Books were not read, TV series were not watched. The girl counted the days and even hours until she met her beloved. It was like an addiction. Kevin patronized Alana. He liked to surprise and please her. The man was not stingy with gifts, expensive jewelry, brand-name clothes, shoes, certificates to spas. Every time he came up with something new. Kevin rented a luxurious apartment for Alana in the city center, spacious, bright, stylishly furnished. Sometimes he stayed overnight, and in those moments Alana felt especially happy. She imagined they were husband and wife. She didn't have to share him with anyone. And she didn't have to hide either. One thing marred the happiness: Kevin had a family, and that fact was impossible to ignore. The man, without noticing it himself, often told Alana something about his children or his spouse. They were mostly funny and sweet stories. The man loved his boys and had great respect for his wife. Did he love her? Alana couldn't answer that question for herself, and Kevin didn't dare ask. No, they often talked about frank topics, but here Alana was afraid to hear a positive answer. What if Kevin really loved his wife? And she, Alana? Just a passing fancy. And yet Alana felt that Kevin took her very seriously. He may have planned a brief affair with the young secretary at the beginning of the relationship, but then it turned out that they were very good together. Despite the difference in age and social status, "You understand me like no one else," Kevin confessed more than once, looking at Alana. "I feel so good with you, and so relaxed, my soul rests." It's such an amazing feeling to realize that there's someone who accepts you with all your strengths and weaknesses. Kevin was right. Alana did love him with some kind of unconditional love. Even if Kevin had committed some horrible act or crime, it wouldn't have changed Alana's attitude towards him. 10 years flew by unnoticed. Alana and Kevin grew closer during that time. They occasionally flew together on vacations. Kevin would make out a business trip at work and take Alana with him. Those were wonderful days: the sea, the beaches, the incredible beauty of nature. And it was just the two of them, with no other eyes and ears. Alana wondered more than once if Kevin knew that her husband had a mistress for a long time. It was unlikely that she was still in the dark. The woman didn't seem naive or stupid. One day, Alana dared to ask Kevin about it. "Don't worry," he smiled, stroking Alana's hair. "She and I have a loose relationship. We don't stress each other with jealousy and control. Cynthia, just like me, is free to do whatever she wants." Alana couldn't understand it. She explained to herself that this relationship between the couple was not a marriage of love, but of convenience. Kevin and Cynthia's parents were big businessmen who had decided to pool their capital and invest it in their children. There wasn't much love between the couple. Alana liked to think so. It was somehow comforting and gave her hope that when Kevin's children grew up and became independent, he could finally divorce his wife to make her, Alana, his lawfully wedded wife. Alana was no longer the young, inexperienced 20-year-old secretary who had agreed to have an affair with her boss. She was well into her 30s, but she was still naive, perhaps even worldly stupid. It seemed to her, though, that sooner or later Kevin would marry her. 2 more years passed, and then one morning Alana realized she couldn't get out of bed. She felt sick, nausea rising to her throat at the slightest movement. At that moment, the woman guessed that a miracle had happened. It looked like she was expecting a baby. Despite the fact that she and Kevin were very careful, no method of contraception gives 100% results. And here's the result. Despite not feeling well, Alana suddenly felt happy. Her soul felt warm and clear. She still got out of bed and got to the pharmacy where she bought the test. Alana was afraid that she was wrong, but the test did not disappoint. 2 bright stripes showed that she had a baby under her heart. Before talking to Kevin, Alana was hardly worried at all. Yes, he'd said more than once that he didn't want any more children, but she didn't think Kevin wouldn't be happy when he found out about the baby. He loved her so much, cared for her so tenderly, showered her with compliments and gifts. Wouldn't he be happy to hear that they were going to have a baby soon? Alana has been dreaming of a baby for so long, envying moms with strollers. And now she's going to have a baby too. Finally, a son or a daughter, whatever. Kevin, however, frowned when he heard the news. "Alana, we had a deal." There was an accusing tone in his voice. "I don't know how it happened," Alana said, surprised at herself. She had already realized that Kevin was not happy about the baby, but she was still hoping to change his mind. She wanted him to share her joy and excitement, to tell her that everything would be all right. But it wasn't. Kevin stood his ground. He didn't want a child, and the only way out was to terminate the pregnancy. Children out of wedlock were out of the question. Alana cried, begged Kevin to come to his senses, and for the first time in their 12-year relationship, she was angry with him. How dare he suggest she get rid of her long-awaited, wanted child? I love you, I love what we have. But the baby doesn't. I have a right to decide that too. No, you don't. Alana slammed the door and stormed out of the apartment Kevin had rented for her. She ran out into the night, wherever she could see. The woman wasn't afraid to stay on the street. She had a cell phone and had accumulated a small fortune over the years. She and her child would have enough for the first time, and then Alana would find a job and things would get better. I won't betray you, my little one, Alana said to her daughter. Yes, to her daughter. Alana realized what was waiting for the girl the moment she ran away from home. Alana quit her job at Kevin's company and rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town where rent was cheaper. Kevin called often, but every time she answered, she thought he'd come to his senses. But no, he was still insistent he wanted Alana back, but he was urging her to get rid of the baby. Alana was nervous, under tremendous stress every day. She dreaded the future. She couldn't find a job and now had no one to lean on. Alana had grown accustomed to Kevin, to his sensitivity, attention, tenderness, support. He playfully solved all the problems that arose and with a few words lifted Alana's mood. And now Kevin had become alien and inaccessible. Alana felt their connection breaking, and it was almost physically painful. Sometimes she even thought about doing what Kevin wanted her to do, get rid of the baby and go back to her old life. But those thoughts quickly faded. No, Alana would have this baby, give birth to it, and raise it. She could handle it. She had wanted to be a mother for so long. However, despite Alana's best efforts, she was unable to keep the pregnancy going. Worries, constant stress, and nerves, all this together led to a tragic result. Alana curled up right on the street. The pain was such that her eyes went black. She thought she was going to faint. Someone called an ambulance. Alana was taken away from the store, on whose porch she was curled up in pain. The woman was ready to endure any agony as long as her baby was saved. But something told her that nothing would work. There was still hope, but it was very weak and ghostly. In the hospital, on a cold couch, in different eyes of doctors, and a voice that said terrible words for Alana clean. There's nothing left to save. Then Alana lay in a room surrounded by other women who were still pregnant. The doctors had saved their babies, and being among themselves, the expectant mothers discussed their babies. Each of them was sure that all threats were over and their babies would be born. Alana, on the other hand, was no longer hopeful. At the first round, the doctor shocked Alana with the news. He told her that she would probably never become a mother again. Your case is complicated. This was about saving your life. You should know that it is unlikely you will be able to have a natural birth. But the doctors added that there are options, as medicine does not stand still. Alana didn't listen. Further, she fell into the abyss of despair and fear. Was her biggest dream not going to come true? Would no one ever call her mom? What was there to live for? Kevin met Alana at the hospital. How did he know what had happened? Alana was surprised, but not really surprised. She didn't feel much at all at that moment. She was going to go to the apartment she'd rented, but Kevin had taken her home, to the place where she'd lived for years, and was happy. Stop fooling around, Kevin said. Get back here. We'd already made a mess of things. Alana didn't care. It took her a long time to come back to life. At first she even ate, but only because Kevin forced her to. She wanted nothing more than a couch and a pillow. Alana blamed herself for not keeping the baby safe. Kevin carried some of the blame too. At first she thought it was his fault. But he had tried so hard. Kevin had turned into a sensitive and considerate man again. He cooked her favorite meals for Alana, watched TV shows with her, cared as much as he could. It was very touching. Kevin seemed genuinely sorry for what had happened. I reevaluated the situation and realized that I was being selfish. I'm sorry, let's start over. This time I'll be more attentive to your wants and needs. The doctors said you were between life and death. It's scary to think that I might have lost you. Gradually, Alana melted away. She accepted the current state of affairs. After all, the world wasn't about children. Many people nowadays consciously choose childlessness. Besides, she had a loving and sensitive man by her side. And Alana decided to stay happy no matter what. And it worked. Kevin and Alana began to travel more. For the next 2 years, they traveled almost all over the world. They climbed mountains, bobbed on ocean waves, crossed the desert in jeeps. It was thrilling, exciting, and wonderful. The main thing is that Kevin was always there for us, protecting us, supporting us. His children were grown. They didn't need their father, and Cynthia hardly required his presence. Kevin spent more time with Alana, and she was delighted. But as time went on, things began to change. At first it was subtle, but then it became more and more noticeable. Kevin was suddenly incredibly busy, always working late, traveling for business, and when he was with Alana, he was in his own thoughts. He didn't compliment her anymore. He didn't ask her about the past day or share the events of his life. Alana panicked. She was used to having Kevin around, and it seemed to her that it would always be that way. They had been through so much together, but now something strange and frightening was happening. Kevin was clearly drifting away, and the process was gaining momentum. Alana hesitated to talk about it. She was no longer a naive girl, but her insecurities remained. Outwardly, Alana looked like a successful and contented woman, but it was only an appearance. She was afraid to hear honest answers to her questions, which could redefine her life. That's why she kept quiet. Kevin himself had once dared to have a serious conversation. That evening was forever etched in Alana's memory. Kevin arrived late when she was about to go to bed. Alana was glad because she missed him very much. She missed the companionship, the jokes, and even the funny jabs. Maybe it wasn't all that bad if Kevin was here. Maybe Alana was just getting herself worked up. Alana, this may be hard to accept right off the bat, but we need to break up. Alana felt like she'd been hit over the head. She fluttered her eyelashes and turned pale, and Kevin hastily pulled up a chair for her, afraid she would faint. Then the man talked at length about how happy he'd been with Alana for nearly a decade and a half, describing her virtues and assuring her that she had more to come. He explained that the relationship had simply exhausted itself. There was no longer that spark, passion, emotion. The same thing is happening to you. I can see it, Kevin said, but Alana thought he was wrong. It was incomprehensible to her. Kevin probably thought it was easier to believe that Alana's feelings had cooled too. Kevin talked a lot and persuasively, as he always did. Alana listened, sometimes nodding, answering something. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't argue. It was useless. Kevin had decided everything for the two of them. You could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice, read it in every gesture. I met someone else, and I had strong feelings for her. I didn't expect that to happen in my old age, Kevin admitted. Alana didn't cry, but she was dying inside. She realized that the old Alana was gone. Kevin was everything to her. She had no idea how to live without him, but he had made his choice, and nothing could stop it. The man couldn't hide a smile while talking about his new love. This is something incredible. Alana, you're going to have to leave my company. You're just going to quit. She'll be working here now. And you and I can't see each other all the time. It's going to be hard on both of you, and on me, of course. Alana nodded, barely holding back tears. I feel so bad about all this, Alana thought. It's going to be okay, Alana smiled, trying not to show how hard it was for her. She didn't want Kevin to feel sorry for her. Just not this. I'm sorry for what happened, but I've been honest with you. This is all very hard. I'll help you find another job. And you can stay in the apartment as long as you want until you find a new one, Kevin added. Thank you, Alana nodded. That was it. Alana's past life was over. She wouldn't stay in the apartment that held so many happy moments. The woman left for another city where nothing would remind her of Kevin. And it wasn't easy. They lived together for almost 15 years. And Alana got used to Kevin, to the joint life with him, thought it would last forever. But everything changed in an instant. Alana found an apartment in a new city thanks to her savings and started looking for a job. She faced a hard truth: it was not so easy to find a job in her specialty. Almost 15 years of working as a secretary did not give her a chance, because there were few suitable vacancies, and she could not do anything else really well. So Alana became a kitchen assistant at a local restaurant. Her job duties ranged from making sure the floors were clean to washing dishes and carrying pots. She did whatever was asked of her. Alana was always ready to work. The work was hard, and at the end of the day her back ached and her legs rang. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to rent a small apartment. And of course there was a nice bonus of taking home leftovers at the end of the day. For Yana, with her limited budget, this was really valuable. Did she miss her former life, a comfortable apartment, traveling, shopping in expensive stores? Probably not. Of course she was sad, but not for the lost prosperity that Kevin had provided. She missed Kevin himself, despite the way things had ended. Alana still loved him so much that even the thought of other men seemed impossible to her. Her friends advised her to get on with her personal life, but her heart wouldn't listen. Sometimes Alana imagined that something would happen to Kevin, that he would lose everything: money, business, house. Naturally, his new girlfriend would immediately leave him. Alana believed she was only with him for the money. As for Kevin's wife, Cynthia, she apparently didn't care about his adventures. Alana, unlike her, would forgive Victor anything and gladly take him back. But those were just fantasies, she was well aware of that. Time passed, and Alana's mental wounds healed, turning into scars. She lived alone, almost reaching her 40s, without children, without a husband, without a profession to be proud of. The absence of a loved one to care for, and who would care for her, was hard on Alana. The loneliness frightened her. Could she fall in love with someone else? There were no suitable candidates in her surroundings. After everything with Kevin, Alana realized that true love existed, and she could no longer settle for anything less. Alana couldn't bring herself to get over the separation. There were new joys in her life books. She became a frequent visitor to the local library. Alana absorbed the works, got acquainted with the inner world of the classics, and through the prism of events in their novels and stories she rethought her fate. In her school years, Alana did not pay much attention to literature. All these works seemed boring to her, and she did not understand half of the words. However, apparently now it was the right moment for reading. In addition, Alana had a cat, Naomi, who turned out to be a very intelligent and affectionate animal. When Alana came home sad, Naomi would start rubbing against her legs, as if trying to comfort her. And when the mistress felt tired, the cat became inaudible and unnoticeable. One cold fall evening, Alana prepared a delicious dinner for Naomi from leftover red fish and beef scraps. She took something from the table for herself, too. I wondered how much food was left over after working in the kitchen. It turned out to be a decent savings on food. Alana buttoned her jacket up to her chin and pulled her hat over her ears. She didn't feel like going outside. The wind was making the windows shake, and it looked like it was going to rain. But staying at work overnight wasn't an option. Naomi, her favorite book, and the soft couch were waiting for her at home. It was cozy and warm, though very lonely. It wasn't that far to walk, only a couple of blocks. Alana had chosen an apartment near the restaurant, saving not only on food but also on transportation. It was already dark outside. The evening was almost pitch black. It felt like winter was approaching. Soon the snow would fall, and the streets would become bright and colorful, and the New Year mood would appear. But so far it was dirty and slushy, uncomfortable. In such weather I wanted to be home sooner. The streets were deserted. No wonder, because the cold, nasty rain had started. The icy wind burned my cheeks. As she passed the playground, which in the darkness looked like the set of a horror movie, Alana hurried home. When she heard that voice, a weak, trembling voice that sounded desperate, "Help, please. I'm hungry," Alana stopped. It was very unexpected to hear a voice clearly belonging to a small child on the street in this weather. There were no adults around, and Alana didn't see the owner of the thin voice either. "Can you help?" a girl came out of the cabin of the wooden-colored ship that stood proudly in the playground. A little girl altogether. She looked no more than 5 years old, huge, frightened brown eyes, plump lips, beautifully arched eyebrows. Tangled strands of brown hair were poking out from under a stretched cap. The girl was wearing a gray boy's jacket, which was 2 sizes too big for her. On her feet she wore sneakers that were worn almost to the ground. All indications were that she came from a poor family. If she had a family at all, she probably should. Children don't happen by themselves or grow up in an orphanage, or close adults raise them. The girl looked at Alana studyingly, as if trying to figure out whether she was friend or foe. What are you doing here?" Alana finally said. "Sitting. Walking down the street." Suddenly it started raining and the wind picked up, so I hid here. Where? Where are your parents? My mom died and my dad disappeared somewhere. First we took a long train ride with him. The train was great, it was warm, the bed was clean, there was plenty of food. We were going to Grandma's. That's what Dad said. And then we got off the train. Daddy told him to wait for him and left. So I went to look for him. Only he was nowhere to be found. Why did you leave? Daddy must have come back for you, but he didn't find you. Now he's worried, running around looking for his daughter. I waited a long time. The little girl shook her head. We got here this morning. I had already left the station at night when it got dark. That did seem strange. Alana could understand if the man had left his daughter for a few minutes to, I don't know, go to the bathroom or drop off things at the luggage room. But according to the girl, she waited for her parent all day. He left me. I guess the little girl sighed. Daddy doesn't love me. It's Mom loved, but she died already. And Daddy, I heard him tell a friend of his that I was a burden to him. So what are we going to do with you now? Alana didn't know what to do. Leaving the girl out here in the cold wasn't an option. That was for sure. Dragging the child to the police wasn't an option either. The baby needed a good dinner and a warm bed right now. She'd have to sit on some chair all night at the station while they drew up a report, while they figured out where to put her, while they called the guardian or whoever they called in such cases. Let's go to my place now, Alana finally decided. We'll eat, watch TV. I have a cat, you can play with it. And tomorrow we'll go to the police. And the police uncles will decide what to do with you. The police, the girl immediately tensed up. You don't have to go to the police. I haven't done anything wrong. Alana realized that the little girl was afraid of policemen for something. Most likely she had transferred such an attitude to law enforcement representatives from her parents. Perhaps they were doing something criminal. It's very likely. Normal people don't put their children in this situation. The cops are kind and good, Alana reassured the little girl. We'll ask them to find your daddy. Okay. Yes, the little girl nodded and added, I'm really hungry. Auntie, do you have any sausage at home? Alana's heart clenched with pity for this hungry, abandoned child. Somehow she reminded her of herself as a child, needed by no one, forgotten and abandoned by everyone. Alana held out her hand to the girl, who smiled and clung to it happily. Along the way, Alana and the girl got to know each other. She knew her name Emma, but she couldn't say her last name. That was strange for a rather small child of 5. Emma told a little about her life. At first, the little girl lived with her mom and dad somewhere in a village or on the outskirts of a small town. Her parents apparently drank. Emma mentioned noisy companies, fights, people falling asleep on the floor, including complete strangers. And in all of this, a small, defenseless child was growing up. Listening to Emma, Alana thought about how lucky she was to be in her aunt's family as a child. And she wasn't exactly loved and certainly not spoiled, but she'd never witnessed a scene like Emma's, either. Emma was taken to work almost every day. As Alana understood it, her parents would take her to the center of a small town and leave her at a crosswalk to beg for alms. Emma was given a lot. Of course they did for such a doll. Brown eyes alone. In general, Emma had a hint of oriental blood-dark skin, coal black eyelashes and eyebrows. She looked like a beautiful, expensive doll. And she was not cherished, not appreciated. Emma should go to kindergarten, wear smart dresses, play with her friends. She is so energetic, smart, curious. But the girl had to spend her days in a dark underpass and beg for change from passers-by. Didn't they hurt you there? Alana asked. Little could happen on the street to a small child? No, Emma shook her head. Everyone knew me in the crosswalk already, my uncle, the guitar player, and my aunt. She sold knitted socks in the crosswalk. And my dad often came to check up on me. In the evening, Emma's family returned home and went on as circumstances dictated. Sometimes Emma was left alone for a few days in an empty house. Her parents went out with someone. Other times, the company would gather at their place. Emma didn't know any other life, so she talked about everything that happened to her easily and casually. It was the norm for her. Meanwhile, Alana's hair was standing on her head in horror. What a lot of things had befallen a small child. And then Mommy died. Emma sighed. Daddy said it was bad vodka. And God saved him. He'd fallen asleep before that bottle was opened, so he survived. But Mom didn't sleep. So her friends got poisoned. Emma missed her mother very much. According to the girl, her parent loved her, treated her with candy, called her a beautiful princess, made beautiful ponytails. But sometimes she beat her, of course. It usually happened on days when Emma wasn't served enough. But if they served a lot, kissed and hugged, sang songs to her daughter and looked at her with kind eyes. Daddy's not like that. He never hugged me, and he never sang songs to me, and he never told me fairy tales. He doesn't love me, but still he's my daddy, and he takes care of me. Now he's lost or left me because he doesn't need me. They finally made it to Alana's apartment. You come on in, don't be shy. See, Naomi's meeting us. Already missed you. Emma seemed to be in a normal apartment for the first time. Everything here seemed unusual, strange and wonderful to her. Simple things made the little girl really excited. Like the lamp on the wall or the toaster or the bathroom. Alana immediately filled it to the brim with warm water to wash the girl. Everything. Alana wrapped Emma in her robe and carried her little guest into the kitchen. Dinner from an expensive restaurant was already waiting for her. Here, grilled vegetables, chicken kebab, fruit. At the sight of this variety, Emma was even confused. Is this something you can eat? For me, she asked. You, Alana smiled. You should try it. It's really good. Emma greedily pounced on the food. It was immediately apparent that the little girl had been starved. And then Alana put Emma to bed in a makeshift bed made from 2 upholstered armchairs. She didn't have a second bed in the apartment. I love it so much at your place, the sleepy little girl admitted. May my daddy never be found at all. I want to stay with you. These words echoed warmly in Alana's heart. She was pleased that Emma liked it at her place. On the other hand, one should never get attached to the little girl. She'd have to go to the police with her tomorrow anyway. That's a shame. What a pleasure it is to take care of a child, to see its happy eyes, to open the world to it. I can't tell you how it feels. Even if only for one evening, but Alana felt like a mother of a wonderful girl. In the morning, she had to dress up the baby in her old dirty clothes. There were no other clothes. Alana asked for time off work and explained the situation. They were sympathetic and gave her advice on how to talk to the police so that they would not think that a kind woman had taken someone else's child. Alana was surprised. She had never even thought of such a possibility. At the station, Alana went to the duty officer and told him her story. He, surprised, looked at the 2 visitors with his eyes and called someone. Then he called the number of the office and let the woman with the child behind the desk. The young man in shoulder straps listened to her, then asked Emma a few questions before writing down Alana's details and suggesting she go home. What about the girl? Alana was no longer indifferent to Emma's fate, especially since the girl clung so trustingly to her hand. How is it to go and leave her here with strangers? The little girl's been through enough. Can I take her? I promise I'll be in touch with you 24 hours a day, and I'll take the baby anywhere at the slightest need. The policeman shook his head negatively. You could see in his eyes that he'd love to help Alana and Emma, but he wasn't supposed to. I want to take her away. The words came out of Alana's mouth before she could think. To adopt her. If her parents can't be found, I'll take custody of the child, temporary, permanent, whatever, just so long as she's with me. Are you sure? The policeman looked at Alana in surprise. More than sure. I don't want her in an orphanage or hospital. Let her go through all the necessary procedures at my place. I'll sign everything that needs to be signed. Certificates will be provided. We'll keep that in mind. The policeman nodded and made some notes on the report. But Emma still had to spend about a month with strangers. First, she was admitted to the hospital in what was called the quarantine block. There, the girl was examined from top to bottom. It turned out that her health was excellent. Then Emma went to the orphanage. Alana visited the little girl almost every day. When Emma saw her, she would rush to her and hug her tightly. It was such a sweet moment. Alana always brought her some sweets or interesting toys. It was a joy to see the child's eyes light up with joy. All this time, Alana was preparing the documents for the adoption of the girl, collecting the necessary certificates, visiting the school of foster parents. She could not imagine that Emma would live with someone else. And the girl herself was drawn to Alana with all her soul. It's a pity that a 5-year-old's opinion won't be taken into account in court. If only she were 10. The search for Emma's father was not progressing. The orientation letters, interviews with possible witnesses, posters on the polls, and TV stories did not give any results. Emma's parents seemed to have fallen through the cracks. Alana was inclined to think that the little girl was right. The father had really abandoned his daughter, just left her at the train station in a strange city. A great plan if you want to never be found. Alana's adoption was going to be a problem. Single woman, no place of her own, low paycheck. Everything was looking up for Emma to be sent to an orphanage. Angry children, angry teachers of state rank. Alana could not imagine Emma, tender little Emma, in such conditions. Sure, the little girl had been through a lot in her 5 years, but she still had parents who took care of her as best they could. Yes, Alana realized that no one would really appreciate and love the girl in the orphanage. Her colleagues advised her to hire a lawyer specializing in such cases. The services of a professional cost a lot, but Alana even sold old jewelry, once given by Kevin, to pay for the work of a lawyer. The lawyer had to work hard, but in the end Alana received the court's opinion on Emma's adoption. For her, it was like a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. Now she and Emma would be together, and the girl would not end up in an orphanage. Alana immediately went to the orphanage to take Emma home. The girl even cried from joy, hugging Alana and saying that she would never come back here again. At home, Alana prepared everything for the arrival of the little girl: a new bed with linens, a closet with beautiful dresses, a desk. She fulfilled all the requirements of the guardianship authorities, creating a cozy and comfortable corner for Emma. And it gave Alana great joy to take care of the child, to choose toys and books for him. Alana's new life began. Emma turned out to be a wonderful child, perky, but able to keep herself in control, inquisitive and kind. She tried to take care of Alana, which moved the woman to tears. Alana had a family now, and she was happy. Emma finally went to kindergarten, where she immediately made many friends. The energetic, intelligent girl was always the center of attention. She invented games and activities that attracted children to her like a magnet. Alana couldn't get enough of her daughter. Emma didn't remember much about the past. It was as if she had decided to forget everything that had happened before she met Alana. And she had. Only sometimes she fidgeted restlessly in her sleep and soon calmed down. Probably all the same, in the subconscious remained some not too pleasant memories of life with her parents. But in the morning the girl could not say what she had dreamed. Alana was very careful to ask her about it, but she just shook her head. In due time, Emma went to school. And then it turned out that the girl has a great ability to do math. While others were solving simple examples, she, having coped with the obligatory part of the tasks, was studying Olympiad tasks for children a couple of grades older than herself. The teacher immediately recognized the talent of the little pupil and tried to develop it in every possible way. In middle school, Emma became interested in computer science and programming. Alana looked at her daughter and could not help but wonder how all these complex formulas and algorithms fit into the head of a 13-year-old. The woman herself was panicked by the sight of code, but Emma, with the keen look of a drummer, fingers on the keys, solved one complex problem after another. Emma became a prize winner of local and regional Olympiads more than once. Teachers believed that the girl had a great future. Alana was in solidarity with them. She was proud of her daughter and loved her very much. She was also worried about her daughter. Like any mother, this feeling was a bonus to the happiness of motherhood. There was no other way around it. Alana wondered how such a child could come from a family of marginalized people. These people abused booze, did not care about their daughter, did not engage in her development. The girl from an early age begged for alms in the underpass. Where did she get such abilities? It seemed strange to the woman. But there was no time to think about Emma's fate. Alana had to work even harder now. She wanted to dress Emma in beautiful, fashionable clothes, feed her daughter delicious and healthy food. She needed money for all that. So Alana did the best she could. It was hard to be alone, but the woman did not regret anything. On the contrary, she considered herself lucky. Fate had given her such a magnificent gift. It was an ordinary fall evening. Emma was already asleep with her hand under her cheek, just like when she was a child. Wow, how fast children grow up, Alana thought. 8 years had flown by. Emma had grown from a touching little girl into a beautiful young woman. Huge brown eyes, long shiny hair the color of melted chocolate. Slender, tall, dark-skinned. The admixture of Oriental blood gave the girl's appearance a special flavor. A beauty, and what a clever girl. Yes, nature had not been stingy, generously endowing Emma with everything at once. Alana smiled and returned to the laptop screen. The woman was trying to find the TV series she'd been told about at work. The search engine, as usual, produced a lot of unnecessary stuff. Alana was about to close the page, but then her eyes caught on a picture. The woman looked at it and could not believe her eyes. A teenage girl, slender, with long brown hair and a dazzling smile, posed in a bright pink swimsuit on the ocean. The wind ruffled the young beauty's hair. Behind her, the waves splashed, and it was Emma. The same facial features, the same smile, even the proportions of her figure were the same. But how was that possible? Her girl had never been to the sea. There's the ocean, white sand, palm trees. The longer she looked at this girl, the more she was surprised. The teenager didn't just look like her daughter. This was Emma. I could even see the mole on her thigh. Emma had one just like it, she thought. Alana pulled away from the screen and took a few deep breaths. This couldn't be a coincidence. Gathering her wits, Alana clicked on the photo. It opened the social network of one Nikita Gortsev. Apparently the girl was his daughter. On the page of this stranger there were more photos. Some of them had Sonia, so the name of the young beauty, posing against the ocean. Alana wasn't good at Russian, but she could understand it from the captions on the pictures. The family lived in a large and beautiful house, traveling. Father, mother, and daughter Sonia were a happy family. Sonia, who looked uncannily like Emma, attracted attention with her exotic beauty. The mixture of blood had a spectacular result. Alana could not take her eyes off Sonia, because the girl was an exact copy of Emma. Sonia's father apparently worked in the field of technology, as evidenced by the photos on his page. Interestingly, Emma also had a knack for programming. Alana made up her mind. She sent Nikita a letter in English without translating it through translators, attaching a few photos of Emma. In the letter, she told her girl's story. It could have all been a coincidence, but something told Alana that such coincidences simply do not happen. Nikita replied right away. He thanked Alana and asked her to stay in touch. He wrote that he couldn't tell her everything yet, but he wanted to meet her and was even ready to come to America for that. He was going to do it as soon as possible. Alana answered him and turned off her computer. What had just happened? Why did she immediately, without thinking about the consequences, wrote Nikita this letter? What would happen now? Alana's heart clenched with icy anxiety. She wanted to rewind time and not send a stranger from the internet that letter. But Alana had always acted in her daughter's best interests, believing that every decision she made would only benefit Emma. And this time Alana did the same, guided by her concern for Emma's future. The adoptive mother tried to give her daughter everything she could, but there was often not enough money for participation in competitions and tournaments, for traveling and new impressions. The possibility that a wealthy programmer from Moscow, who seemed to have some connection with the fate of Emma, could take part in the girl's life seemed unlikely, but so necessary. In the morning, after a restless night, Alana told Emma everything. The girl stared in wonder at the open social media pages, taking in the unknown details that seemed strangely familiar. I think I remember these places. Or rather, not like that. I don't remember, but I dream about something like this house sometimes. Unsure, of course. Maybe just something similar, Emma pondered. Her remark about everyone having a double added a mystical tinge to the story. When Nikita flew in, the tension reached a climax. His interest in the details of Emma's fate, his desire to know every detail of how Alana had found the girl, had filled the meeting in the cafe with a sense of foregone conclusion. Nikita was completely different from Emma, tall, trim, with blue eyes and blonde hair. His appearance was not associated with the dark-haired, brown-eyed girl. What had happened during this encounter? Could Nikita have shed light on the unusual resemblance between Sonia and Emma? Is there some deep, hitherto unknown connection behind it? The questions were many, and the answers were bound to follow. The world Alana and Emma were entering promised to be filled with new discoveries, and perhaps changes that would change their lives for the better once and for all. And yet the attentive Alana noticed the similarities, the dimple in Nikita's cheeks when he smiled, and his eyes. The man nodded in the exact same way. Even his nose seemed to wrinkle in the same way. It turned out that Nikita knew English. He had worked for a long time with English developers and had learned the language. Of course, the man confused words and cases and spoke with a strong accent, but Alana understood him perfectly. "This is just an incredible story," Nikita pronounced as they settled at a corner table. "I couldn't believe my eyes at first when I saw your daughter's picture. What a blessing that you wrote to me." Alana nodded. She wasn't sure she had done the right thing. It seemed to her that her life was taking another turn. Things were about to change abruptly again, and not for the better. She felt like she might lose Emma. The feeling was strong, and of course she already guessed that Emma was no stranger to this man. Nikita made a pleasant impression. He was handsome, polite, energetic, and very friendly. Alana almost physically felt the warmth emanating from him. There was nothing repulsive or suspicious about him to fear or antipathy. And then he told his story. Alana caught every word greedily. A lot of things fell into place now. The puzzle was coming together, but what to do next? Jonathan was a talented programmer. After high school, he moved to Moscow, where he first attended university and then got a job. He bought a house, married the beautiful Maria. His career was going uphill. The young, talented programmer was entrusted with complex projects, and one day he got into a team that cooperated with developers from America. They all worked together on a grandiose international project. In his personal life, Nikita also had everything going as well as possible. The young family was born at once 2 twin girls. Nikita and his wife Maria were happy, healthy, beautiful daughters, financial prosperity, love and mutual understanding between spouses. What more could one wish for? When little girls Sonia and Kira were 2 years old, Nikita was sent on a business trip to California. It was necessary to solve several work issues, a matter of a few hours a day. The man still had a lot of time left to get acquainted with this beautiful city. "So I made the huge mistake of asking Maria and the girls to come with me," he recalls. "That trip was supposed to be an exciting journey, but it turned out to be a real nightmare for our family. At first, everything was going just fine. Nikita would drive 2 or 3 hours to the office in the morning and then spend the entire day with his family walking around California. They visited the zoo and gallery together, walked around the center. True, having 2 young children meant more than just doting, joy and happiness. Both young parents were tired, which was probably what caused them to let their guard down. It happened in a huge, beautiful park with fountains, wide, flat paths and playgrounds. There were a lot of people in the park that sunny day, no surprise, since the weather was great and the weekend was ahead. Parents seemed to have decided to take their children out for a walk. Nikita was holding Sonia's hand and thought that his wife was also holding Kira's hand. But Maria and his daughter disappeared from his sight for a while. The sea of people had swept them in different directions. Kira had always been more curious and energetic than Sonia, always running somewhere, climbing. Maria was better at handling her. I thought Kira was dragging her wife off to find adventure again. It happened so often. I wasn't worried at all," Nikita continued. 5 or 6 minutes passed, no more. When Nikita finally saw Maria, she was standing at the monument, looking around for her family. Seeing Nikita, the woman smiled and rushed towards him. She was alone, without Kira. Nikita tensed, of course, but didn't panic yet because, well, little else, maybe Kira stayed on the swings or goes like a tail behind her mother's back and just can't be seen. "Where's Kira?" she asked anxiously, looking at her husband. And then Nikita realized everything and jumped up in horror. Maria thought that Kira was with him, and he thought that the daughter had stayed with his wife. The little girl was lost, and it had been about 7 minutes, if not more. How do we find her in this huge park with so many people? What to do? These questions instantly filled his head. Nikita immediately called the police. The call was responded to lightning fast, because it was about the disappearance of a small child. An outfit arrived at the park. At first, everyone hoped that the girl quickly found just lost, just wandering somewhere along the paths, admiring the surroundings, studying the world. It was quite in the character of Kira. but the little girl, as if in the water, rolled into the water. It soon became clear that something had happened to her. We had to return home after a month, Nikita continued. We left with nothing. We didn't know where our little girl was or what had happened to her. It was horrible. We can't even find words to describe our condition with Maria. We couldn't find a place to sleep. We couldn't sleep. We didn't eat anything, and we blamed each other. He told how he was constantly in touch with law enforcement, even hiring private detectives. They worked on the case too, but not a single lead. As the years passed, there was little hope of finding Kira. Sonia grew from a little girl into a beautiful young woman. Looking at her, Maria and Nikita could only imagine what their Kira looked like now. Maria always felt that Kira was alive. Nikita shook her head. She didn't doubt it, and she was right, Alana pronounced. Emma is Kira. There could be no doubt about that. Then, years ago, the little girl was taken from the park. The girl was probably too young to pronounce her name correctly. And the people who took her decided her name was Emma, not Kira. Well, or they just called her their own name. Emma didn't remember anything. She was just a little girl, barely 2 years old. She gradually got used to the new mommy and daddy and learned the language. Their goal, apparently, was to make her not just a well-behaved child, but a full-fledged member of society. It was probably for this purpose that the girl was taken away. But then something went wrong. Emma's mother died, and the father, perhaps having found another way to earn money, realized that the girl no longer interested him. So he brought her to the train station, far from the city, where he left her mercilessly. Then Emma was found by Alana. All this time in Moscow, the girl's real parents found no place for themselves. They, of course, had to learn to live with this loss, but I know I could not. I didn't even want to imagine what Maria and Nikita had endured, to know nothing about the fate of their own child. Yeah, it would drive you crazy, Alana thought. Especially they may have been saved by the fact that they still had another daughter, Sonia. She was the one they were holding on to. And then I get this letter from you, Alana. And I see a picture of Emma. I'm sure your Emma is Kira. I haven't told my wife anything yet. I need to check it out first, do a DNA test to be sure. If there is a mistake, Maria is unlikely to stand for it. Nikita continued. There was no mistake, of course. The analysis confirmed Emma and Nikita's parentage. I honestly told everything to my daughter. The woman was naturally worried. Everyone realized that now that Emma's birth family had been found, Alana would be alone again. How am I supposed to live without my daughter now? How do I tear her from my heart? Alana agonized. But I have to do it. Emma is not my property. It is important that she lives with her blood relatives. With them, she will get more than I can offer. A brilliant future indeed awaits her with them. And so I watch as Emma begins to socialize with Nikita. You can immediately sense a kindred spirit in their interactions. Emma spoke to her father as if the years of separation had never happened. They laughed at the same jokes, discussed programming languages, argued over solving complex Olympiad problems, understood each other with half a word, even with half a look. I immediately realized that Emma was 100% Daddy's daughter. The woman wasn't jealous. No, she was happy for the girl. Emma's going to be really happy now. The paperwork took a while to finalize. Emma continued to live with Alana. Nikita preferred to stay in a hotel so as not to embarrass the hostess. They saw each other every day, walked, talked, discussed the future. Emma is leaving with her father. It was already a settled matter. The girl looked forward to seeing her mother and especially her sister Sonia. She was a little worried, but she lived the days before departure in joyful anticipation. After all, the girl would soon have a whole new life. But it was hard for Emma to part with Alana, the man who had raised her. How will I be without you? The girl sighed in the evenings. I don't know what's happening to me. I seem to want to leave as soon as possible, to see how things work there, to meet my mother and sister. But I won't be happy without you. We'll get used to it, Alana smiled. And then, we'll see each other. I'll fly to visit you and you'll visit me here sometimes. Oh, and Skype's still on too. It's not like that, you realize that. Of course, Alana understood. She tried her best not to show Emma her sadness. Alana was used to having such a sweet little girl in her life. She had raised her, considered her a daughter, But that didn't give her the right to make Emma her property. Alana had made the decision that was most favorable to Emma, and now she had no doubt that she'd done the right thing. And then Emma and Nikita flew away. A cold emptiness appeared in Alana's soul at the same moment. Yes, once again a woman was starting a new life, and it would take some getting used to. Emma wrote and called often. She quickly learned the language and made friends. In fact, Alana had no doubt that she would. Emma talked about how much fun she was having in the new place, but she always ended the conversation by saying how much she missed Alana. If only she knew how much Alana missed her. A few months passed and New Year's Eve came. This time Alana decided not to decorate the tree. She always did it for Emma. Why would she do it now? Alana was spending the holiday alone. She'd been invited to a party, but she declined. She wasn't in the mood right now. She wanted peace, quiet, comfort. She wanted to sit quietly, watch the New Year's program on TV and think about her own thoughts. Just at that moment there was a signal that someone wanted to chat with Alana on Skype. The woman smiled. It was Emma, of course. There was no one else. Indeed, a smiling, sweet face appeared on the screen. Emma's eyes were shining, as always. Sonia loomed over her shoulder. Alana still couldn't get used to the fact that the sisters looked so much alike. They had become inseparable since their reunion. Emma wished Alana a happy new year, wished her happiness and good luck, told her again that she missed her, and then said that Nikita wanted to talk to her. Alana wasn't surprised. She often talked to both him and Maria. They told her about how things were going with Emma and constantly thanked her for saving their baby girl. Nikita probably wants to wish her a happy new year. There's nothing special about it. But from Nikita's face, Alana somehow immediately guessed that her life was kind of ready to take another sharp turn. The man looked too serious and determined. The woman's stomach even churned with an incomprehensible premonition. Nikita actually wished her a happy new year. And then, "Kira misses you very much." "Very much," he said, looking into Alana's eyes. "She has everything to be happy, but she's still not completely happy. She misses you," Nikita began. "Maria and I thought it would pass. We could just call each other, visit each other. But you two seem to have formed a strong bond. Kira, it literally splits in two. One part is reaching across the ocean to you, and the other part wants to stay with us. The children's doctor said it's very dangerous to her health." So then Nikita made Alana an offer she just couldn't refuse. It turns out that not far from them sold a few years ago a small house with a plot of land. And Nikita bought it, counting on the fact that Sonia, having lost one of their daughters, will stay to live with them, even after becoming an adult. So we bought this house, where, according to our plan, adult Sonia was to live with her husband and children. But Sonia and Kira are still just kids. Besides, they both already said they're not going to live in our neighborhood. They both have grandiose plans to conquer the world, and our cozy neighborhood is too crowded for them, you see. Anyway, the house was idle. "We're asking you to move in," Nikita finished. Alana looked at Nikita in silence. She didn't even know what to say. His words were too good to be true. Is she really going to live next to Emma? Yes, she'll have to get used to everything new, learn the language. But that doesn't matter. If Alana gets a chance to talk to her girl every day. There are jobs for you here. A lot of families need a nanny. You have experience. Besides, there are a lot of restaurants here that are always in need of kitchen helpers. Kira said you're the one for the job, Nikita continued. So are you going to take it? There's nothing keeping you in your town, and this way you'll be close to Kira. The girl is very attracted to you. She needs you, and we need you. Maria and I also want to do something good for the man who saved our daughter. We're one family. Now the house sits idle for nothing anyway. You'll take care of it too, so you'll help us a lot. So what do you think of my offer? Nikita looked at Alana hopefully and waited for an answer. She probably should have said that she needed to think about it, to weigh the pros and cons. But why? After all, the decision had already taken shape in her head. This was just great news. Of course I agree, Alana said without a shadow of a doubt. Her answer was full of determination and joy. The prospect of living near Emma and becoming even closer to the family that had welcomed her so warmly seemed like a marvelous opportunity. It wasn't just an offer to move in, It was a chance to start a new life where she would not only take care of the house, but also help with Emma's upbringing, support her, and be there to experience all the important moments of her life. Nikita smiled back, feeling relieved and happy about her decision. That's wonderful, Alana. We're so excited to have you become a part of our life here on a permanent basis. Kira will be thrilled. It was a new beginning for Alana, full of promise and opportunity. A new page in her life was opening before her, filled with family warmth, new challenges, and most importantly, the happiness of being close to those she loves. Mommy, can you hear me? Are you there? Yes, I'm sorry, daughter. You know that when I'm after work, I can easily fall out of the conversation. Holly tried to keep her voice calm. Dennis and my son and I will come to you for the holidays. Or do you have other plans? You tell me right away, and I'll quickly change mine. I don't know about Dad's plans, Holly exhaled. All I know is that they're beautiful. He left me, found a beautiful young woman, and announced it almost honestly. They've been serious for a long time. So we're officially divorced. I'm sorry to break the news on New Year's Eve. You know I'm not good at hiding things from you. Mommy, I'm coming to see you. I'm going to wait for Dennis to get home from work. Take a cab and come over. It's been so long since we've had a late-night chat. Jane, I'm fine. You don't have to leave a 1-year-old baby at night because of me. It's not going to make me feel any better. Mom, that baby has a dad who's an adequate, responsible, modern father. You can fool anyone with your voice, but not me. In an hour and a half, I'm sure you'll be expecting me. Holly listened to 3 quick beeps in the receiver and tried to smile helplessly. She was lucky to have a daughter. Not everyone was so lucky. Holly learned about the difficulties of the transition age only from other people's stories. She was friends with little Jane and continued to be friends with the almost grown-up Jane. She also managed to avoid worrying about her daughter's first love dramas. There were no dramas. Jane took her studies seriously. In the 2nd year, she found a job and managed to combine one thing with another. And by the end of the institute, saved up for a vacation to long-desired Italy. Of course, her parents added a little. And it happened. As in the song, quite by accident, we took tickets to the neighboring seat at a high altitude. The daughter met her future husband on the airplane. Venice, Florence, Rome. 6 months of meetings upon returning home, followed by a wedding and the birth of a child. Holly delighted in the role of caring grandmother and seemed to herself almost perfectly happy. She had always felt so comfortable and at ease in the family of Jane and Dennis. In the midst of their warm love and beautiful, almost wordless understanding of each other. It's good that my daughter is not repeating my fate, she thought gratefully one day on the subway coming back from her son-in-law's daughter's house, and she was startled at her own thoughts. What could she be dissatisfied with? She and Ben have an absolutely normal life for a couple with a long history. They do not scandalize, do not even argue on matters of principle, live peacefully. Ben earns good money and knows how to manage money wisely. She is, in general, lucky with her husband, except for that eternal feeling of the last few years that something important is missing. In the very real love that any woman expects to meet, she had not been particularly lucky since her youth. She just accepted it calmly. After all, to be honest, there are plenty of women like her around, far more than those lucky enough to be truly loved, not for a honeymoon but for life. And until noon yesterday, Holly thought her married life was a success. She put all her heart and soul into her family and didn't consider it a sacrifice at all. She herself is pleased to take care of her husband, to arrange a cozy home where both want to rush from work. Their apartment is neither bigger nor cozier in layout than that of friends and good acquaintances, but on holidays everyone likes to gather at their place. She always has everything so well arranged. Ben's buddies often showed a joking envy. He seriously took taking care of himself for granted. Could it be any other way? If it could be, it wasn't for him. For the last couple of years, Ben had been busy building and finishing a country house, devoting all his spare time to it. He wanted not just a house, but a full-fledged, comfortable dwelling, where you can live all year round if you want. Holly had no time to go and look at the construction site every week, and at first she was very worried about it, but Ben waved it off. Come on, you want to be everywhere. It's better for everyone if you're in charge here, and I'm in charge there. Holly realized, or she thought she realized, that he really needed something of his own, where he was the boss. Yesterday morning she had suddenly felt sick, weak at work, and her head ached so badly that the usual pill didn't help at all. Apparently she did not look well at all, because even the chief, who was called indifferent, looked at her and said, "Holly, sometimes it's better to stay home for a couple days than to take 2 weeks sick leave. Go home and get some rest. You'll be back at work the day after tomorrow. It won't affect your paycheck. I don't want a lot of exhausted employees. I'm not a despot, as some people claim." Holly nodded gratefully and went home. How wrong we sometimes are in our judgments about people, especially if they are superiors who are generally disliked. Holly quietly, trying not to make any noise, entered the apartment. Ben arrived at night after a business trip. His sleep should not be disturbed, but Ben was awake. From the living room, a conversation was heard. Judging by the absence of the interlocutor's voice, Ben was talking on the phone. Holly did not immediately even realize that it was her husband speaking. The voice and intonation was as if it wasn't his. "My sweet sunshine, I'm coming over today. My old lady is pickling tomatoes after work today, according to a new recipe. The recipes are new every year, but my wife is old. I'm sorry I'm talking nonsense just to be witty. Honestly, I'll get my act together soon and tell you. I appreciate you and I'm happy you don't want to spend New Year's Eve without me. I'll decide before New Year's, I promise. I swear, my little girl. Don't be a child, understand my situation. It's not easy for me. It's more than 25 years of my life. We raised our daughter together. 5 more years and she'll look old, but she's all about family. The pantry's already bursting. She wants everything to be up to par. If I leave, she'll be all alone. There'll be no one to take care of her. I don't really care. I don't want to spend the rest of my life hanging out with men just to get away from my boring wife. I need joy in my life, and my joy is you. Holly hesitated for some reason to turn on the light in the hallway. It was enough light from the entryway, hitting the mirror, to see this woman gray, exhausted. That's what she is, no one's rival. And her husband pities her, too. Old, pathetic. If she didn't have such a headache, she would run out into the street, just to wander somewhere, until evening, or until she gets herself under control and regains her ability to think clearly. No, she wouldn't even have the strength to go down the stairs. She wanted to shut the door quietly, out of a ridiculous desire to listen to the conversation, but her husband heard the sound. He said goodbye and went out into the hallway. I decided not to make tomatoes if you basically don't care. Her strength was only enough for this ultimatum. Maybe it's for the best that you heard everything. I really hate lying to you. I should have ended it anyway. You're a good person, and I'm sorry to you. But there's no point in continuing it. Holly nonchalantly affirmed. It's nice that at least you recognize your old lady as a human being. Holly, but why the poison? Let's be honest. I'm only 53. I'm not ready to be a grandfather. I have a need for love. And why should I give it up? We raised our daughter, and we haven't had much of a connection since. You just refuse to see it, clinging to this meaningless semblance of a marriage that's like everyone else's. If you're willing to look and live like an old lady, that's your right and your choice. Take care of your granddaughter. You have someone to take care of. I would have lived like that too, like a lot of people my age. But I was lucky enough to be loved by a young, beautiful woman, and I loved her very much. Not everyone is so lucky. It's a new life, a real life. You can't give that up. It's a gift. You see, it's only now that I'm realizing how miserable I've been. This is my chance to start over. You won't be disadvantaged in any way. You're the mother of my daughter. I'm keeping this apartment for you. I won't take anything from here except my clothes and shoes. I'll live in the house with her. It's not for nothing that I've invested so much in this place. Apparently, fate has guided you don't drive a car and you haven't invested any money in it. So it's logical that it stays with me. They'll give you some money for the first time. We'll discuss the amount. It's called a kickback, Holly commented. What if I ask for too much? I said, we'll talk about it. Ben repeated patiently. You're so in love and so sensible. You've thought about everything for a long time, but you lack determination. And so everything is on top. Strategist. Holly, let's be human. In case you haven't noticed, I didn't bark at you doggy style. I don't need to have this conversation at all. I came home with a headache, and in situations like this, I lie in a warm bath. It helps. While I'm in the bath, get your stuff, your papers. What else you got? Thoughtfully, so you don't have to come back here for something you forgot. And leave the keys and file for divorce yourself. I don't like to go to court. You know I won't drag this out to spite you. Set a date, I'll come at the appointed day and hour, and we'll get divorced. No money. I've got a decent salary for me alone. Just don't show up. The day of the divorce is the last time I'll ever see you. And if you want to play the noble, give your share of the apartment to Jane, so that your lovers don't disinherit the girl. You have to admit, it's only fair. Mom, were you thinking about my inheritance at that moment? Quietly amazed Jane, listening to her story. Who should I be thinking about, daughter? Holly shrugged. A sad grin crept across her pale face. When such things come, you have to grasp at straws that will keep you from losing interest in life. I'm lucky to have you and Dennis. I promise not to torture you too much, not to turn into the annoying old woman your father thinks I am. I've been sitting here thinking. He's right about something. I always made sure he was well-fed, warmly clothed, rested comfortably, was surrounded by comfort. It was like a home service. I thought it was the right thing to do in a family. I didn't realize that's not what he needed. I should have thought more about myself, tried to be charming, and things might have turned out differently. Although there's no point in talking about it now. You're justifying him, then? Jane asked. To be honest, you surprise me with this habit of always blaming yourself. It's too much. I didn't tell you, but I'll tell you now. My father and I had a conversation about 3 years ago after New Year's Eve when he gave you a blender for New Year's Eve. A good blender. It still works now, nodded her daughter. But it's not a gift, it's just a thing to buy when you need it. I suddenly remembered that for every holiday your father gives you something practical and useful, everyday things. That's what I told him. He was so surprised, as if it was the first time he heard that you can give perfume and jewelry or theater tickets. Some kind of spa visit. Something that would emphasize that he thinks of you as a woman, wants to see you beautiful and satisfied. But my dad didn't hear me, even took offense at me, saying that I hadn't gotten rid of my naive dreams yet. I didn't think much of it at the time. Well, I tried, but it didn't work. And now it comes to mind. And he himself was comfortable that you're so, on the care of yourself, almost no money to spend. Who needs a beautiful, well-groomed wife? He'll take care of it himself. And whoever just wants a comfortable wife, that's how he behaves. I wish Daddy would spend all his earnings on his incomparable beauty. You even cheered me up, Holly smiled confusedly. I didn't realize I had you like that. I just love you very much, and I feel bad for you. You certainly don't deserve this. All of Dennis' friends are jealous that he has such a mother-in-law. They joke that you're the reason he married me. Dad's just used to luxury care, taken it for granted all his life. He'll definitely regret it. You'll see. I don't want him to regret anything. Let him go in peace. Thank you, Jane. My kitten. Don't fight with Daddy. You're a grown-up, diplomatic man. You realize he's still your father, right? Our divorce is our divorce, but it has nothing to do with you. Besides, he's vowed to take care of your inheritance before the divorce. So I'm sure I won't change my mind and start dragging things out. Don't worry, Mommy, I won't refuse, Jane assured him with a smile, looking at her mother's palm. Just so that some monster doesn't get it. And I admire your self-control. I never realized you were so strong. Holly's tears suddenly sprang from her eyes as if an invisible dam had burst. Daughter, I don't understand myself. I wanted to scream, to beg, something like, don't leave me. Let's try to fix everything. I'll forgive everything. Forget everything. Take everything into account. Only if you stay. But something kept me back. It was a shame to cry in front of him. You're the one I trust, and I'm crying in front of you. And I'm not ashamed. Too many drunks. Not good. Not likely to show up here much. Uh-huh. Me neither. Listen, Holly, when this dance is over, let's go and sit somewhere cozy and talk. I'd like that, shall we? Holly really wanted to get out of here. And the guy seemed serious and nice. And she'd never been asked out before, except by her girlfriends. By the end of the evening, Holly had learned a few things about the guy. He's a young specialist in railroad production, an engineer. He has his own apartment, inherited from his grandfather, but he dreams of building his own house. He's the only son of his parents, from a full family. He doesn't like discos very much either. They play pop music, but he listens to heavy rock. I don't know why he decided to see what his ex-girlfriend was doing in those places. Yeah, it's definitely an ex-girlfriend. It was a stupid idea, but at least he met her. The girl didn't think there was any interest in meeting her. She just sits there and listens to his story, saying almost nothing herself. But it seemed Ben just needed to speak up. He walked Holly home and managed to earn his mom's approval. She liked that the guy wasn't being cryptic. He waited for his mother to open the door and handed Holly to her hand in hand. Well-mannered, and not like these modern informals or hooligans. The next day, a friend, Svetlana, ran in and told her that she had seen her in the company of a new acquaintance. It turned out that Ben was just using her for a performance. He was ostentatiously courting her in front of her ex-girlfriend, Helga. She couldn't shake off her sadness for 2 whole days. On the 3rd night, there was a short ring at the door. It was Mom who opened it. She was expecting a girlfriend, but on the doorstep stood Ben with a small bouquet and a cake. On that evening, they began dating. Holly quickly fell in love with him, angry at herself for it, and tried not to think about why he really wanted her, especially since her mom comforted her, telling her not to believe the gossip. Holly listened to her mother in silence, objecting only to herself so as not to upset her. Ben, and there was nothing to compare yet. They were just meeting as friends. It was enough for her that this guy was in her life. That's how it lasted until the summer, until his birthday. It was warm days and nights, celebrating the holiday at the guy's house. There were only his parents and Ben's friend and his wife, who had just returned from a wedding trip down south. For Holly, it was a day of getting to know Ben's parents. Her mother thought it was a good sign that he was serious, and had even spent half her paycheck on a cocktail dress for her daughter. Although for the countryside it was quite possible to get by with something simpler. Holly said so to her mother. Mom was amazed to learn that her not too confident daughter, it turns out, is not afraid of the upcoming acquaintance. Holly's boldness was explained simply she did not believe that all this would last long. One day Ben would disappear as quickly as he had appeared. If he doesn't return to Helga, he'll meet a new love. He's too handsome and promising for her, and he probably realizes it himself. That's what the girlfriends hinted. That's what the girl herself thought. Of course, deep down she still wanted to believe that it was not them, but her mother who was right. Such a happy evening like that had never happened in her life before. She behaved as usual, just happy about Ben's holiday and her parents' love for her. Both her father and mother and her friend Roman liked her, with absolutely no effort at all. Never before had she felt such ease. The closer the day leaned toward evening, the more her confidence grew that this day was made for something special. Her parents had gone into town for the night, promising to stop by her mom's house. The newlyweds had discreetly secluded themselves in the attic that had been prepared for them, and Ben and Holly were left alone by the brazier with its almost transparent corners. Ben seemed delighted to be joined with them. He placed a bottle of expensive champagne, given to him for his birthday by his boss, on the table. All that night they spent together, and in the morning Ben, having seen his friends off, drove Holly home himself. He pulled up in front of the store, jumped out of the car, and returned 5 minutes later with a bouquet of burgundy roses. "Did you ask her to marry him?" "No, Mom, he didn't. But it was really nice. Just don't swear, or at least not today." "She will." Mom promised confidently, "I can see that, and I'm not in the mood to fight today or tomorrow." "Do you think your mother is a prude?" They hugged each other and laughed quietly, relieved. There was no tomorrow to look forward to. In the evening, the family of the guy in full formed on the doorstep of his and his mother's apartment. His father, putting delicacies on the table, announced that they were old-fashioned people, so they decided to ask for the girl's hand in a domestic setting. But the wedding will be already in a restaurant, and according to all the canons. Then, in the early 90s, many girls still dreamed of a chic, large and solemn wedding. But Holly was not one of them. She wanted the kind of wedding that her daughter Jane had a quarter of a century later. Light, small and elegant for those closest to her, but with a honeymoon trip that would be remembered for a lifetime. But no one had asked her opinion about her own wedding, and she hadn't even noticed. She was sitting at the table, discussing something with her mom and future mother-in-law, and couldn't believe that all this was happening to her. Her beloved Ben wants to see her as his wife. She will make sure he will never regret it. Ben hasn't felt as happy as he does now in a long time, as his divorce from his indifferent, aging wife went off like clockwork. Things had worked out much easier than he had imagined for himself. Holly had done without scandals, threats and tantrums, even without tears. Maybe she'd been living with him out of inertia for a long time too. That would absolve him of some of the guilt of abandoning his wife. And yet, it seemed hurtful, acutely hurt his ego. He considered himself the center of the world, and she was letting him go for nothing. He feared that the family had saved an unpleasant surprise for the day of the divorce, but everything was as mundane as a visit to the therapist. Spouses who have no minor children and property claims are divorced without a court. Ex-wife kept her word. Given on the day of his departure no claims, if the interests of the daughter will be respected. She came to the divorce indifferent and some kind of refreshed. She looked at Ben without reproach, as at a neighbor in a cramped subway car as soon as possible to get out and make room. When they left the building, already divorced, she said goodbye indifferently and walked away, not looking like a lost and unhappy person from behind. Ben had a stupid feeling that he had not had a good time getting to know his ex-wife. Wow, now ex-wife. I wonder how long she'd been practicing that independent look. His friends called him a fool when they found out he was making a drastic change in his life. Some directly and harshly, some diplomatically. The point didn't change. He didn't even take offense because he felt right. Some of them are driven by jealousy. It's enough to show a photo of his sweetheart to ignite that envy. Someone just never had such a feeling, does not understand or has forgotten for what a man all the achievements and victories. He was like that himself. He thought it was normal to return home to his wife to grow old together imperceptibly. They just all live in hibernation, and he suddenly woke up. Dad was right in his day. Ben has never once regretted marrying Holly over the years. He had only started dating her to show Helga that he too could be looked at with the kind of adoration he looked at her with. Ben's value in her eyes didn't increase at all. But he suddenly realized that he wasn't really upset that his attitude toward Helga had long ago grown into some kind of bad habit and had let go of the obsession of the last 2 years. He was grateful to Holly for that. In her company, he felt so cozy and confident that it was very difficult, and even unnecessary, to give up this pleasant feeling. Holly did not demand anything from him, just enjoyed his company. The parents noticed the change in their son. It was impossible not to notice. He stopped being nervous and snapping for nothing, did not disappear at night, organized the regime and remembered about the interest in work and career. Even the expression on his face was different. For 2 years they had been worried about what good could come out of their son's stupid love for a girl of easy behavior, who only wanted to sell herself more expensive. Now they were silently rejoicing, afraid to jinx the unclear prospects with questions, and were also grateful to the unknown girl. Of course, my mother did her best and made some inquiries. Ben usually avoided discussing his personal life with his father. They were too different, and his father never liked his previous choices categorically. But after his 27th birthday, when he introduced Holly to his family, he had approached, "We need to talk." The father tried to be persuasive. "Oh, girl at almost 25. Wow, in this day and age. And no worse than that ex of yours. Mother and I noticed the way she looks at you. You'll always know you're welcome home and cared for. In time, you'll appreciate that. If I were you, I'd marry her right away. You won't regret it. You'll remember my words with gratitude when I'm gone. And there'll be no escaping the whoremongers. You'll have enough for your lifetime, if you wish." And Ben got married. Dad and Mom are gone. It is unlikely that he would have been able to realize his life-changing twist if they were alive, or would have had to hide his divorce from Holly for the rest of his life. His own or his parents, they would never have understood or accepted. They loved her like their own daughter. And most surprisingly, she loved them sincerely too. Sometimes he missed his parents, but now he was relieved that his new love would not have to face the undeserved dislike of his relatives. Since there were no relatives except Jane, her daughter didn't want to meet her. She's only a few years older than you. You must have something in common. Dad, if I had to live in the same apartment with your girlfriend, I'd look for something in common with her, so I wouldn't complicate my life with negativity. I don't see the need. Sorry, we may never cross paths in our lives. I'm guessing your woman would be fine with that too. I've already agreed not to hurt your feelings or say mean things to you. And this is quite difficult for me now, and don't complicate my life even more, please. Ben understood the daughter had always been closer to her mother than to him, so there was nothing to be surprised about. But Diane was upset because she refused to meet him. I'm not even upset with myself, I'm upset with you. Your daughter does not want to make even the slightest effort to understand the feelings of her father, who did everything for her and continues to do. It's so natural to accept a gift of a share in an apartment, but to do something nice for her father is an impossible task. She was so genuinely upset that Ben had to console her for a long time, and the next day to please her with a visit to a country restaurant. She is so life-loving, so fond of pleasure, so happy at every surprise and gift, so giving her love after a day full of entertainment, that any of his sorrows pale in comparison with this happiness. Happiness is, now remembered suddenly a precise phrase read somewhere. The first 2 months of a free life. Holly struggled with her old way of life, tried to reshape it. At first she latched onto the simplest thing. Guys, why don't I come down every weekend and spend the whole day walking around and doing zines? And you two can be alone together. But the guys rejected the offer. They wanted to raise their daughter on their own. Don't be offended, we'd rather go somewhere as a family sometimes with you and Zena. The cultural program invented for her was very interesting but not happy. Holly felt like a wedding general or a dressed-up bear when her daughter or a friend brought her to the theater or to an exhibition with a new hairstyle and in new dresses. They try to entertain her, and she, unable to genuinely rejoice, walks around, red as jam. I'm ashamed of myself. Listen, it's like you're making titanic efforts on yourself. Shrewd Helly sparkled. Don't pretend for our sake. Think about what you really want for yourself. Holly confessed, and the girls convinced her to go on vacation, not to the cottage, where she was eager to help her mother Dennis grow, harvest and prepare crops, but to a real vacation. In April, Holly flew to Egypt. 10 days away from home, like on another planet. That's what she was really happy about. She did the math, she hadn't been to the sea in 12 years. She went every year with little Jane. And then Ben started building a house, and the house ate up almost all the finances. Jane had been going to the sea alone ever since, to children's and youth camps. Holly vacationed alone, avoiding noisy companies. And it didn't weigh her down in the slightest. Perhaps we should go on vacation every year. It is possible even in the off-season, and not for the beach, to walk through different old towns, through quaint markets, through narrow streets. She came back feeling completely refreshed, and immediately fell from ship to ball. It was good that there were still a few days of vacation left, while she was running around with her worldly upheavals. She completely forgot the matchmakers have a 30-year wedding anniversary. Pearl's wedding is the day after her return, and she didn't even bring a present. Just some oriental sweets and fruit teas. But the daughter who met her laughed. She knew it, and she had already bought everything from both of them. But the matchmakers celebrated the wedding at the campground. Of those invited, almost no one was surprised. Dennis's parents did not like flashy restaurants. They were natural people. Both of them were fond of fishing and long walks in beautiful places. Holly even exhaled deeply in relief when she recognized that the events did not require meticulously chosen dresses, heels, elaborate hair and makeup. She began to suddenly understand her friend Lena, who was growing weary of it all. Instead of a long morning gathering on the day of the anniversary, she properly slept, leisurely drank coffee, and gladly dressed in loose beige pants and snow-white t-shirt from Egypt, on which 3 camels dancing on the background of the pyramids. The weather is unusually warm now for April. It doesn't happen often, but you have to throw on a tight windswept hair she just let loose over her shoulders. So be it. They say women over 40 shouldn't wear their hair long. Whoever made that up, let them not wear it. And she'd completely forgotten that her honey Karen eye was so tan herself in the mirror. Holly liked her. I don't remember exactly when it started. Probably on vacation. There, Some heavy lump in her chest unnoticeably dissolved, and she felt like she just liked living. Soon her children would pick her up, and her vacation would continue with a holiday at the matchmakers. Soon it would be New Year's Eve again. It seemed like just yesterday they were celebrating the previous one. It is necessary to think of gifts, to plan something interesting. But there was neither strength nor ideas. Ben was so exhausted for the last year, as he had never been tired, probably since his senior year, when he combined work with business trips and diploma. But when he'd been a kid, he'd had an easier time of it. Diane had noticed recently that he used to be a man of celebration, but now he was completely dull and boring, despite her best efforts. At the word effort, Ben even perked up because he was surprised. It seemed to him that all the efforts apply just him. Yes, and simply lives on everything ready, and he doesn't mind. But she must realize that for the eternal celebration of his strength is no longer enough. I'm not a showman. I'm the chief engineer of the project, Sonny, he joked. No, she has nothing to reproach him with. She's just too sensitive, and she's young. For her, it is important to have an eventful life, new impressions. She was counting on him to give her all that. Here I'm thinking about where to take Diane for New Year's Eve. Ben shared his thoughts with his old friend James, having stopped by his cottage for a cup of tea. I can't think of anything yet. We will fly to the Emirates in March. It has long been decided. I can't afford 2 trips in 3 months. There are some fundamental problems with the house. You've become wooden. I understand, of course, that active love makes you thin, but in your case, it's not that. You're busy, like a working housewife with 2 children, my friend said scathingly. As the owner, who didn't need to leave the house today, he'd had enough whiskey to make him want to be frank. Thanks for the support and advice, buddy, Ben said, hurt by the comparison. You're welcome. Who else will tell the truth but an old friend? Let's get back to specifics. How would you like to celebrate the new year yourself? I would have stayed at home, Ben grinned. We would invite you, Kat, and decorate the tree. We used to celebrate every year like that. What was bad? The lineup changes, James said. And we're already invited. We're not going to say no. I'm sorry. Listen, why don't you and your beauty meet at home together? I mean, you two shouldn't get bored of each other yet. Romantic areas, candles, pillows. We spent New Year's Eve at home last year because we didn't have time to book anything decent with the divorce. You know how messed up that was. And on a second gray New Year's Eve, Diane might take offense. Your problems are far from me, to be honest, James said. I don't know what to advise you. Look, what if you don't show originality and go to work? She'd be less bored and more appreciative of the pleasures of a simple vacation. Don't give me that look. I'm not suggesting that she should be hauling sleepers and sitting at the checkout and the supermarket, or even keep an eye on the sack conveyor belt. She's got some fine maiden profession. She had a life before you. She's not a schoolgirl after all. She worked in a flower boutique, I told you. I told you it was a fine profession. Give her a course for New Year's Eve to train to be a top-notch creative florist. That's what it's called, isn't it? After which she'll get a job at some cool place. I'm dead serious, by the way. Show you really care with a gift like this. It's become very difficult for friends to find common ground. Over the years, they have a lot less in common than they did when they were younger. I'll think about it, Ben said tiredly. He was not ready to distance himself from his old friend. After the meeting with James, he had planned to stop by his sick colleague's house to pick up some paperwork and discuss some things, but he suddenly decided to postpone the visit. He wanted to go home. Called, rescheduled. In the morning, I felt I'd done the right thing. I stopped by my favorite candy store and wine market. Tomorrow's Friday. What's stopping me from starting today? Arriving home, he remembered that he'd forgotten to call Diane to tell her he'd be an hour and a half early. Oh, well, it would be a surprise. The light was on in the living room, but a quiet, melodious voice could be heard from the dark veranda. It was one of her funny habits to chat with her girlfriends in the evening on the phone on the open veranda, looking only at the chain of streetlights along the highway. In the summer, it was understandable. In winter, it didn't seem too comfortable, but she assured me it was fine, throwing on her fur coat. Not to listen to my serious lover or nonsense. Shrugged her shoulders. Ben a couple or 3 times still unobtrusively overheard, He wondered what she was talking about with others, not with him. It was really insignificant girl talk, nonsense. They advised each other manicures, swimming pool, bragged about gifts. The girl appeared very content with her life in these conversations. It pleased him, and he didn't listen to them anymore. Now she was chattering to light rhythmic music and therefore did not hear or see Ben drive up. The garage was on the other side of the house. He walked along the wall toward the veranda to the voice of the sounding brook until he began to discern individual words in himself. I think of him very often, right in the details. All the nicest things I imagine what would happen if I dared. And I realize he can't give me anything but that. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, Yul. I really don't want to be a short-sighted fool who ruins everything for a nice little fling. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why I haven't decided to see him alone yet. And I probably never will. I just hope guys aren't chasing guys these days. Maybe he'll call one more time and then stop. I can't take that chance. You're right, kitten. I'm not that good at faking it. Mine may be a little old for me, but he's reliable. Yeah, he's asking me to marry him. I'll say yes. You don't throw those options away. He'll definitely do anything for me. Not like those guys who already split a restaurant bill. Thanks, kitty, for listening to me. I kept you late. Yeah, and I'm freezing. I'm gonna go to my cabin. Bye, 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 kisses. The door slammed as the coffin board rattled overhead. The light footsteps of the jar hushed the hallway. Ben stood, touching his forehead to the icy wall of his house. When had it gotten so cold? It had been warm not so long ago. It's a good thing she's such a chattering fool. Otherwise he'd marry her and put her in his will. I don't doubt that's the right and manly thing to do. Jane will still get the apartment, and her husband is quite a well-to-do and prosperous family, and she has only him alone. Yes, the girl convinced him of this so discreetly that he was sure it was his own decision. So she's not the fool here. He had fallen into a well-known ancient trap, like many before him, and he would not dare to enter his own house and throw her out like a mischievous cat. It was good for him to be with her. He was good with her. Even if it was self-deception. He should give her money, just to give her the money he had saved for a vacation with her in the Emirates. Isn't that a pity? She deserves it. It's just enough until she finds a job and goes back to her mom to live. She's got a place to live, she won't go to waste. Or at least she'll be happy to have a spicy new romance out of wedlock. He'll call her a cab. Left alone, Ben reached for the bottle of expensive sparkling wine he had brought today. Well, let's celebrate. He had never believed in the law of the boomerang, considered it a consolation for losers. He believed that everyone gets only what they can get for themselves. The rest was mystical. No, it's not. That mysticism had a place in his real life. What did Holly feel then, listening to his phone conversation? Only a year had passed and he'd gotten his boomerang light and fast. Fate had spared him yet. He hadn't had time to marry and dump a lot of money into her welfare, and Holly had lived with him for a quarter of a century. And his fatigue was always gone. When he came home, he had all the things that make up the warm prosperity that many only dream of reaching for. He got, without the slightest effort, completely undeservedly, everything he had worked so hard to earn for the last year. His father was right. He had never regretted his choice, so reasonable, so convenient. Now there was no father, no mother, no friends. Only Holly's friends now. There was only one place left on earth he could go now, if he was accepted there. He'd do anything to be accepted. No, not now, not in this sorry state. To think things over, to sleep, to work, to find the words. He'd honestly left the keys to their shared apartment in the mailbox the day he left, so he had to wait a couple hours for Holly to get home. Ben found a parking space around the corner of a nearby office center, left the car there, and went for a walk. And she herself didn't call him either, even wished him happy birthday by text. And he didn't even give it a second thought. Nothing will make up for it. Jane can't stay mad for long, can't play Snow Queen. She's a lot like her mom. Ben realized he was drinking his third cup of espresso at the mall coffee shop. Time to go check it out. Surely the wife must have gotten home by now. Indeed, there was a light on in the living room kitchen windows. Ben hesitantly hesitated in front of the intercom, but a couple of minutes later the door to the entryway opened, and out jumped a skinny old woman with a small dog and a brightly colored harness under her armpit, some subtly familiar figure from his neighbors. Ignoring the granny's condescendingly mocking glance, he entered the entryway unnoticed by himself and found himself on his customary third floor at the light gray door, then rang the bell, which he fumbled for without looking. Holly opened almost at once. It seemed to him that at first she wanted to slam the door shut before he could get in, but then for some reason she changed her mind. She had recently returned from somewhere, probably from a party, because between her and the threshold stood a pair of dainty boots in a puddle of snow, which Ben hesitated to step over until she waved her head lightly. "Come in, Dot." What happened? It was Holly, and yet completely not her at the same time. She had never been heavy-set, always just a woman of average height and build, but now she looked as light and casually graceful as a young girl. She had contrived to dye her hair a dark chocolate shade that went so well with the unusual warm color of her eyes and skin tone. And her hair was not gathered in a sleek, comfortable ponytail at the back of her head, but was loose over her shoulders in a sort of artistic mess, like in the paintings of Renaissance masters. She was wearing a simple, flowing burgundy knee-length dress with a frivolous neckline, emphasizing her slender waist. One could stare at her like fire for a long time. She'd gotten 10 years younger at least since he'd left her. Anyone would say now that the woman in front of him was a beautiful, attractive woman. That's what Ben said. "You've become very beautiful." "Wow." "Thank you," Holly replied, smiling politely, as if she had been told that every day her whole life. She paused briefly, waiting for him to say something else, but he remained silent. And then she continued softly, without irritation. "Listen, Ben. If there's any important business for me, tell me at once. I'm waiting for guests. You don't call, you don't warn me. And I have my own plans. I can't give you much time right now. I'm sorry. Could you forgive me?" He breathed out his question. "So I have long since forgiven you," she smiled with peaceful surprise. "You did not go for career in some secret society, which requires an official forgiveness of ex-wives, certified by a notary. You should only call your daughter more often. She may never admit it, but she misses you." "Really?" "Let's get to the point. What's your reason for coming here?" "I want you and our family back. I want to make things right. I was an idiot. I made a dead-end mistake, and I admit it outright. I hope I didn't realize it too late, because I haven't done anything legal. I understand that you haven't been expecting this for a long time in your feminine ego. I understand that you need to take a break. Think it over calmly and tell me when I can come over. I'm really sorry things didn't work out with your young friend. You were so enthusiastic I can't bear to call you a sneak or anything like that. And it doesn't make any sense now. I have someone I love. We're adults. After my stupid prank, you had a right to get revenge. You proved to me how wrong I was in a big way. Let's just agree not to relive any of these adventures. You misunderstood me, or rather, you didn't hear me. I didn't say I wanted to prove anything to you or to myself, much less to take revenge. You should have realized after all these years that I wouldn't do such nonsense, much less go looking for a passing fancy. The woman and her daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter arrived early for the matchmaker's wedding. Dennis always left for a long journey in advance. He assured half seriously, half jokingly, that his girls would forget something and still have to go back. And then they would ask to stop 10 times to walk around and take photos in beautiful places. That's more or less how it was. But it didn't prevent the family from always arriving before the set time. Immediately, everyone went to assess the campground, chatting merrily. Zoe loved water of all kinds, shapes, and temperatures, and was already running quite well. So she had to be watched with both eyes and reacted to her ideas promptly. Zoe ran as maneuverably as bats fly, suddenly changing her trajectory. After her thoughtful vacation, Holly was a little weaned from the fast pace of life and let her guard down. In April, it was mostly roach, as far as she could remember from the stories of the matchmakers, and it seems to be caught from the shore. She didn't expect that a rubber boat would be hidden in the light between the bushes, and that her granddaughter would jump into it. Holly had a kind of stupor at any unexpected danger, and it was pointless to fight nature. And then a silent fisherman in boots materialized from somewhere. He entered the water and deftly, gently extracted the sim from the boat. She was not frightened or upset, just giggled and showed him her tongue. "Hello, take it please." The man with laughing eyes held out his granddaughter. "Thank you," Holly replied, dropping the days. And both laughed briefly, meeting each other's gazes. The fisherman had a neat short beard, highlighted by silver hair and merry gray eyes. "Excuse us," Holly told him, and added, "For some reason we're here for a wedding anniversary. Only too early, so we get into all sorts of adventures. We're waiting for the others." "Everyone here is like that," fisherman announced, "including me. I'm Andrew, a classmate of the Happy Jubilee. It's better to go straight to Andy." She introduced herself too, and so they became a couple. From that day on, they sat next to each other at the table, talking about everything, dancing only with each other on the creaking wooden dancing terrace. No one paid any attention to it, as if it went without saying that they were a couple and everyone was used to it. It was so strange and funny, and it was like they really knew each other a long time ago. And there was no fear that they might say or do something wrong, ruin everything. Her son-in-law's mother, putting her granddaughter to bed, told her we were young almost every day to communicate, and then fate scattered us in different cities. He has lived far away for many years, and still every year he comes to us, then we to him. It's strange that you two haven't crossed paths until now. Yeah, well, we've never celebrated any anniversary this big. It was always just the two of us. I knew his wife well. Her name was Iron, too. 7 years ago, she died of a heart condition. They didn't tell anyone, but now I think that's why they didn't have children. They didn't want to risk it. Andrew was all alone, really alone. Random girlfriends are out of character for him. He needs someone to look after him. Of course, he's self-sufficient, and being alone hasn't changed him for the worse, but he's not happy about it. There's a reason we wanted to have a company wedding. Something was driving us. Looks like we're a Cupid family now. If someone had told me yesterday that I could be in this situation, I would have laughed incredulously, maybe even a little offended at being laughed at. The girl fell fast asleep, and they returned to their guests. The wedding was honored by the staunchest guests until morning. Long gone from the tables, people divided into interest groups and flocked under the shoreline canopies to bonfires or in the gazebo at the edge of the woods. Andrew walked Holly around the lake in the boat. She dozed in the pre-dawn mist. By noon, all the anniversary guests had departed, and the two of them stayed on the lake for a couple more days. Why does everyone think that roach is a bland, tasteless fish that is only good for dried fish? It was delicious, a delicacy. And then Andrew went to his place in Kaliningrad and called every day, and came for weekends twice a month. And she'd already gone to see him a few times. The last time was early December. Slow, lazy snow fell vertically along the cathedral walls. Holly had arrived wearing thin gloves, and Andrew had brought her soft woolen mittens from the market. Now, in this cold, he announced that the mittens would have to be removed for a little while. With careful tenderness, he put on her ring finger a ring with a ruby, which he had already hidden in his palm for a long time, and immediately put her hand back into the mitten. "If you agree to marry me, it's an engagement ring, and if not, it's just a gift from the heart." Back home and meeting with her daughter, telling her news, Holly was shy and tried to appear a judicious lady, weighing the pros and cons. "I've worked at this agency for so many years. It's all its own and all its own. I know from experience how long it takes women my age to find a job in my specialty. To employers, we're like pensioners. Not everyone understands the benefits." "Mom, come on. Recruitment agencies like yours are not exclusive. How many times have you thought about changing jobs? Here's your chance. What about you two as a family?" Holly was hesitant to make another argument that should have seemed compelling. "You're used to me being the go-to guy, and if you need anything, I'm here." Argument. "I'm sorry, Mom. It's not that you and your help aren't important. It's just that you know very well that we're not helpless enough to make my young, beautiful mom a full-time grandmother. As far as our benefit is concerned, we already have a pearl couple of grandparents here, but we don't have any in other very interesting cities, and that's a shame. A happy grandmother in Kaliningrad is her own active guide on vacation. There's so much to see when Zoe grows up a bit, Mom. And actually, that's not the point at all. Would you see yourself flying right now, not touching the ground, not pretending that you care about anything more than your love right now? It's not funny at all. It's completely normal. And we're all happy for you. Holly wrote a letter of resignation and worked out her 2 weeks. She tried to see her friends more often. At least for a little while, because soon they would have to see each other less often. Today after work, she ran through the stores, browsing through farewell New Year's gifts for her colleagues, and in the evening she waited for her friend to visit. She promised to bring a familiar master of wedding hairstyles, opposed to all kinds of glamour. The friend and now argued that you can go to the wedding even in overalls, but not to build a stylish romantic hairstyle of gorgeous long hair would be a crime. And that same night, the ex-husband showed up. I understand you were trying to escape your loneliness. Good for you. You've benefited from this incident. I mean, it's been good for both of us. You've blossomed. I've learned to appreciate what I have, not chase illusions. You know in your heart that it's not worth it to be adventurous at our age. We have too much in common. It won't be so hard for us to start over. By the way, I've almost finished the house. Just a few minor details. You'll like it. Maybe you could do some decorating tips, get involved. Well, we could live there and rent this place out. No more cramped quarters, there's views just a stone's throw away. Well, you probably remember. We'll go mushroom picking. You love mushrooms. In summer, we'll go to the sea on vacation, so no vegetable gardens. We can go together with young people or take our granddaughter, or just the two of us, to renew our feelings. It's all gone, honey. There's nothing to update, Holly said without a trace of gloating or irritation. I'm grateful to you for the good things we had, for our wonderful daughter. And for this incident, as you call it, too. Before this incident, I lived and did not even know what I could be, what a man could be with me, how happiness feels. I could have lived my whole life and never known it. You must really understand me. A year ago, you said something like that. I was wrong, you see. And you're not afraid of being wrong. I'm not, Holly smiled with quiet confidence. Ben's eyes glittered with the cold anger that had once robbed her of her will and strength, and she decided it was time to show him the door. She didn't feel like exchanging insults. They had absolutely no place in her current life. But Holly didn't have to do anything. She was saved by 4 short, cheerful rings at the door. She came in, and with her was a tall, thin girl in a cap with huge curls. Well, meet Alona, wedding fairy, stylist. And this is our bride. Oh, and this is her ex-husband, who came to privately congratulate and wish his ex-wife happiness in her new marriage. Very modern. Hello, Ben. The man grabbed his jacket off the rack and left the apartment without looking back. He didn't remember how he'd gotten outside, how he'd gotten home. Not far from home, he was stopped for speeding. My ex-wife left me, and I was on my way back to her. I thought she'd be happy. Forgive me. She's getting married in a year. So much for a woman's fidelity. She's a decent woman who had a home, a job, a granddaughter. What better person to talk to than anyone else? He had a desperate, sudden urge to speak out to someone he didn't know. The occasional hitchhiker effect, or whatever it's called. Could you breathe into a tube, please? At home, the man immediately called Jane, apologized for not calling for a long time, asked about his granddaughter, and when he could see them all. Maybe we can go together somewhere to the water park. Or what's your daughter's favorite? Dad, did something happen to you? My daughter asked right away. Yes, daughter. I need you to be my ally. There's no one else to talk your mom out of doing something stupid. Not so long ago, you were such a romantic, putting passion above all else. Her own daughter snickered with amusement. Ben told me all about Diane. Jan is a kind, impressionable girl who likes to pretend to be cynical sometimes, so that her kindness is not overused. She listened to her father attentively and seemed to really sympathize. Then Ben began to ask her to influence his mother. She is a clever woman, and a clever man learns from other people's mistakes. And didn't she want her mother and father to be together again? Daddy, she said softly, let's be honest. I'm a little past the age of teenage trauma that comes with parental divorce. Your marriage is over, isn't it? Well, you could have had someone else. I'm really sorry you got one. You're not the worst kind of woman to get a woman to notice you for more than a house and a paycheck. You're still pretty good. But if Mom agreed to come back to you now, that's what I'd call a mistake. That's when I'd talk her out of it. You lived with her because she was comfortable. She deserves to be loved, not just a comfortable, good wife. And now she has that, and I wish the same for you. I see. You get a share of the apartment. You don't need your father anymore. Right, little bitch? He dropped the call and disconnected the phone. He didn't want to get up in the morning. When you drink alone, for some reason the hangover is always harder than after the same dose of booze in a company gathered for a fun occasion. Probably the occasion also affects. Although smart doctors do not write about it anywhere. I wanted to send a message to the general that I was ill and needed 24 hours to recover. I remembered that today was a day off, fell asleep again, and slept for another 3 hours. After a contrast shower, I slowly began to regain consciousness and turned on my phone. I was used to being in responsible positions, that I always had to be in touch. Without communication, I felt disconnected from the world, afraid of missing something. He counted 13 unanswered calls, all to Diane. He must not have been too convincing when he kicked her out of his house. He just couldn't be rude to her. She's got some kind of special talent. Girls like that get away with anything. As long as there are fools like him in the world. Ben's thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It's her again. I can't run away from her like a kid. Just don't hang up the phone, begged a confused, melodic voice. Just listen to me. It may be important for you too. Yeah, it's going to be hard for you to come up with something new to hook me. Trust is lost. Let's not waste time. Don't just use platitudes like I'm pregnant. Try them on your other partners. But I'm really pregnant. The girl sobbed desperately into the phone. And I haven't had any other partners, no one but you. Well, there were some fantasies, but I didn't fulfill them. Who hasn't? I wouldn't dare cheat on you, I know myself. I really didn't know about the baby when you kicked me out. I felt sick yesterday, nauseous. I took a test, and I found out. You can take a DNA test and make sure it's your baby. Stop for a minute. I'm trying to get Ben to cut in. Do you want to have the baby? Yes, I do. It's about time. And I really want to. Do you need financial support for the baby? I need a father. He needs his dad. But what's the play for? I'm not acting. I really want things to work out between us. I promise I'll never lie to you. And with a baby, I won't have to do anything stupid. Mom raised Diane alone, called her princess, dressed her like a doll. She was good at sewing, worked convenient hours, and took sewing orders home. From the age of 3, she gave the girl to dance, took her to different circles. Except for dancing and singing, she showed no interest in anything. She also studied without much zeal, but went favorite with most teachers and often received a grade higher only for the charm and ability to raise the mood of the teacher. Mom saw all this, understood, and not at all upset that the daughter will not come out of Sofia Kovalevskaya or Margaret Thatcher. She clearly has a different fate, and let it be happy. The girl grew up very pretty and artistic, with a lovely dotty figure. She could have become an actress with such external data, but this requires determination, which she did not possess. She was only interested in what came her way, and the prospect of making an effort for her goal caused bouts of ennui. Yes, well, if it's so hard, we can do without it. And the only things that came into her hands were boys. A charming blonde with a beautiful figure and delicately misty, sly blue eyes imperceptibly became the center of any company, pushing aside both wittier and brighter in character girls. Her mother was afraid that her daughter would repeat her fate, spin some silly romance, imagine it to be the love of her life, and be left alone with a child. She insinuated her princess heartfelt and patiently, yes, money and connections I have no, and you do not have special abilities, the desire to achieve something to achieve. Well, no and no, what can you do? But you are beautiful and sweet, with an easy character. Everybody likes you. That's a great opportunity, too. We can't all be independent and self-sufficient. You need only once to arrange your woman's fate correctly, wisely choosing a husband who will not be a burden to you and take care of you, so that you do not spend your life in endless work, as I do. There's certainly nothing beautiful about IT. If algebra and English were given with difficulty, these suggestions of Mama's were understood with half a hint. Mom could have no fear. The daughter politely, sweetly, and even sympathetically blew off young men who could not offer a secure life. Some guys really liked, but the life of Mom and many women around her demonstrated the fact love is not for long, and then only struggle with life's problems together with someone or alone. She did not dream of conquering a real rich man, did not believe in such fairy tales. She was a very practical person. She would be satisfied with just a fairly well-to-do and firmly on his feet man, in respect of which you can be completely confident. She didn't go for casual flings so as not to spoil her reputation. It only seems like a big city, after all. By the age of 30, her experience consisted of only 2 lovers, both more or less exactly as she'd planned. In both cases, wives and underage children messed up the plans. Both wives were tenacious, unwilling to let their husbands go. They involved the whole family in the psychological treatment, blackmailed with children and division of property. OEA was losing. When she met Ben, she realized he was the one. He came to their flower boutique for an original bouquet for his boss's wife, to whom he was invited for her birthday. "This is not a corporate and personal holiday for loved ones," explained a polite man in a decent suit, so that she better understood what kind of bouquet was needed. She liked the visitor, she had her principles, and was squeamish about even promising options if the man didn't seem pleasant. Now she smiled and motioned that he would definitely come again. She'd been lucky, though. His daughter turned out to be grown and married, and his wife belonged to a type she didn't understand, but not a dangerous one. And now she was lucky again. It is only necessary to behave correctly, to finally grow up and submit to young fitness instructors and other entertainment seekers. A baby's not bad either. Now that's kids she really likes. James looked at his friend with his trademark wistfully ironic grin that people sometimes took offense to, but Ben didn't care right now. "What can I tell you?" James pondered aloud, leaning against the bar. "It's not the worst thing for you to do. The feeling of not being needed by anyone is probably much worse. Parents are gone. Ex-wife and daughter are happy without you. And then one day you're a young dad again. They say late fatherhood is the most realized." James raised his index finger admonishingly, then rubbed his forehead. "What if you have a son? You've always been jealous of me having 2 boys. You'll be the favorite authoritative dad, the big boss. I'm not encouraging you to live with his mom, although that's up to you. You can't just vaporize everything. I don't believe that. And you finding out what she's really like, that's not a bad thing. Anyway, I'm staying out of it." The friend went home in a cab, and the man decided to air his head a little from the brandy heaviness through the evening city. He was a little drunk after all, but not drunk enough to fall asleep anywhere. The bar where they were meeting was in the center, not far from the station square, quite aptly decorated for New Year's Eve. Ben was drawn there for some reason, stomping through the busy crowd. It looked as if some train had recently arrived. People with luggage were coming out into the square, chatting animatedly as they greeted them. And Holly. Suddenly his ex-wife came out wearing a dainty crimson coat, looking like a girl. She was gently held by the shoulders by a tall bearded man, and a lot of people were looking at them for some reason, though they were just walking along, talking and laughing quietly. Ben stopped under a streetlight, and they saw him. "Hi," Holly said quite nonchalantly. "Hi, heard about the wedding. Congratulations. I have a son on the way." "Wow, that's great." Her companion smiled broadly and openly. "Well, congratulations to you too." "Wow, thank you. Okay, I'm off to see the family." Ben waved his hand and quickly disappeared into the crowd. Who was this slightly inebriated knight of the sad image? Andrew asked, raising one eyebrow amusedly. "My ex-husband," Holly answered. "If he's not lying, I'm happy for him. But then I'm also happy for that simpleton. I owe him a lot, after all." Ben watched them get into the cab, talking and laughing, and when they were gone, he went to the station cab driver and gave him Diane's address.